The royal scanner called Mogu an F-rank mole. Mogu tapped the gate stones twice. Behind us, an entire city answered, SSS. Nobody in the summoning hall had asked what a digging claw was for. Every summoned hero received a combat beast. Clion went first. The same Clion who made school feel like a sentence back on Earth. His circle exploded into an S-rank Stormmane lion wrapped in blue lightning. Akino let go of my hand before the thunder stopped. 3 years together, and she crossed the marble to stand at his side. Apparently, 3 years weighed less than one S-rank roar. My circle produced a palm-sized mole. One paw of his lion was bigger than my entire beast. The public card appeared above us. Class, Burrow Keeper. Beast rank, F combat value, 0. The court laughed. The king called Mogu a pet for digging graves. Then a private card opened, one only I could see. Hidden bond. World Burrower. Any willing settlement connected to Mogu's tunnels can evolve without a rank ceiling. Every working foundation makes the next one stronger. See your rent network, 1 meter. I read the ceiling line twice, and my heart started to pound. They saw a pet for digging graves. I was holding the only beast in that hall that could outgrow the kingdom. Clean leaned down and asked whether I wanted my pet to bury me. I should have let it go. I always had. Back on Earth, when he shoved my books off the desk, Akino told me not to make a scene. When he copied my survey project and took the prize, she said I should be flattered he chose mine. When he mocked me in front of the class, she laughed first, then apologized after, as if that fixed it. This time, something in me went quiet. So, I crossed the circle and punched him in the mouth. Cleon touched the blood on his lip like it belonged to someone else. Consequences had never once reached the director's son. Until a boy with an F-rank mole. Kill it, he spat. His lion lunged. Mogu tapped the marble twice. A hollow surface channel opened beneath one golden paw. The S-rank lion dropped to its shoulder before it reached me. The hall stopped laughing. That punch bought me 12 nights outside the barrier. The crown set me to Hollowmere, a beastfolk quarry camp scheduled to be erased after the red moon tide. At the gate, Mogu pressed one claw into the ground. Ground waiter detected, 18 meters. Network radius, 1 meter. 12 nights, 3 systems before the tide. Safe shelter, 12 days of food, and a defense line strong enough to turn a monster herd. If we built all 3, I would walk back through that gate with the kingdom's most useless beast. Hollowmere would return beside me. The last royal escort left us on a wind-cut road at dusk. Its carriage lamps shrank between the green hills until the road held only Mogu, me, and enough silence to reconsider punching an aristocrat. I decided the punch had been structurally sound. Mogu rode inside the hood of my teal field jacket with his cream muzzle pointed into the wind. His tiny claws rested against my collar, but every few steps he tapped twice to remind me he was awake. The copper, temporary warden seal hung from my wrist on a red cord. One edge carried 12 notches, with the final notch shaped like the Capitol Gate. The seal expired at dawn on day 12. Night 0 had already begun. The sentence counted every night from this one through night 11, whether Hollowmere welcomed me or not. At dawn on day 12, the gate would open for one assessment and no appeal. The seal gave me temporary authority over emergency salvage, but it gave me no ownership of the camp, no power to bind a resident, and no right to spend labor without the ring hearing the cost. If Hollowmere failed its assessment, its residents lost their provisional status, and I stayed outside the barrier with them. A line of smaller text curved around the back. Original summoning coordinates. Accredited heroes only. That was not a promise of a portal home. It was the first proof that the crown knew where home had been. I closed my fist around the seal and kept walking. Mogu wriggled down my sleeve when the road crossed a shelf of packed ochre stone. He landed beside my boot, sniffed once, and drove his 3 blunt front claws into the soil. The ground answered me as a dim blue cross-section behind my eyes. A wet layer shimmered far below the road. Ground waiter detected, 18 meters. Mogu dug until a palm-width hole reached the length of my forearm. His claws struck packed stone, and the tunnel stopped as cleanly as if it had met a locked door. He backed out with dust on his cream muzzle and collapsed against my shoe, panting hard. Current network, 1 meter. The hidden bond had no ceiling, but it definitely had a ground floor. I offered him a drop of water from my bottle cap. He drank, then pushed the cap back as if refusing charity after a perfectly normal engineering test. You found the aquifer. Mogu snorted at the stone that had defeated him. Reaching it can be tomorrow's impossible problem. The road bent around the quarry rim. Hollowmere opened below us in the last gold light. An abandoned royal quarry formed a vast ochre bowl between green uplands. Patched canvas rows clung to the western shelf beneath a cracked rock overhang. Cooking smoke drifted from the central bench where 31 marked stones formed an uneven ring. A damaged forge leaned under an indigo awning on the south terrace. Children carried kindling between adults unloading chipped stone and warped timber. At the center of it all stood a waist-high black triangular marker cut with thin crown grooves. The mercy marker looked less merciful than the name suggested. I counted roof patches, drainage scars, and support posts before I counted faces. The settlement had not failed because nobody understood work. It had failed because every repair had been forced to borrow from something already breaking. The quarry gate was 2 posts and a chain that no longer reached either post. A charcoal and cream skunkfolk woman waited beside it in a burnt orange mason's apron. Copper eyes moved from my earth clothes to the warden's seal and then to Mogu, another temporary overseer. Her voice made the title sound like a weather warning. Kai, Uguz. She did not offer her hand, and I did not assume she wanted mine. A rust orange-red panda woman in a mustard coat stepped around her with a ledger tucked under one arm. How much grain does the crown claim it sent? I haven't seen the claim yet. Then your first useful act can be finding it. Sora, Rin said. I gathered that she was not the welcoming committee. Sora's turquoise eyes narrowed. We stopped funding that committee. A broad, silver-gray wolfkin man watched Mogu from beside a rack of spears. His crimson-brown armor had been repaired often enough to qualify as a family history. Can the mole fight? The public card appeared over Mogu before I could answer. Combat value, 0. A few people laughed, but most only looked tired. Apparently not Garo. Mogu stared at the card as if considering whether public appraisals could be buried alive. Rin pointed toward a square stone hut above the common. The overseer's shelter is yours until the assessment. Mogu crossed the path, pressed one claw to its threshold, and froze. 3 hard taps struck my survey sense. A dark pocket opened under the hut's front corner. The wall above it leaned by almost the width of 2 fingers. Nobody enters this building. Rin's tail stiffened. You have been here for 12 breaths. There is a void below the threshold, and the front wall is rotating into it. I tied the warden's seal across the doorway and scratched a red line onto the lintel. That includes me. Garo pushed one shoulder against the wall and felt grit slide under his boot. His amusement disappeared. Rin crouched beside Mogu's tap mark and tested the stone with the handle of her hammer. The hollow answer reached everyone. Red tag, she said. Rin's acceptance was not trust, but it was an operational beginning. I took an empty bedroll in the leaking western shelter row. Rain had already stained the canvas above it in the exact shape of a small continent. Mogu curled against my ribs and glared toward the abandoned stone hut. Yes, your first official duty was evicting us from the dry room. He tapped once, satisfied. Rin gathered the household stewards around the ring of stones while daylight remained. I placed a salvaged board across 2 crates and began the audit. Resident count? 92, Sora said. 31 households, 71 adults eligible for civic votes and 21 minors or dependents, Orin added from behind a parchment beige record sash. His moss-gray shell carried old ink marks along the rim. Nobody underage gets folded into one of your hero contracts. Nobody gets folded into any magical link without understanding it and choosing it. Orin adjusted his gold spectacles and wrote that answer down, rather than rewarding it. Safe sleeping spaces? Rin looked toward the cracked western shelf. 51, if the overhang remains polite. Food? Sora opened her ledger. 4.2 days at current ration. Injuries and sickness? A fawn-colored antelope folk healer in a sage coat gave me 3 separate numbers and refused to let me combine them. Charlotte, she said after correcting my categories. Noted. Holes? A goat folk smith with soot-black curls laid 3 measuring rods on my board. They disagreed with one another by enough to ruin a brace joint. Taro. He tapped each rod in turn. Stone right cubit, crown survey foot, caravan rod. Last 3 structural failures? Rin named a roof corner, a store wall, and a gallery stair without pausing. Nobody needed a lecture from me about survival. They needed 92 sets of facts to stop behaving like 92 separate emergencies. I sketched the basin, the shelters, and the quarry galleries on the board. My first version included 6 symbols, 3 line weights, and the kind of legend professors admire because students suffer. Mogu picked up one pebble. He dropped it in the center of the drawing. Rin's mouth twitched. Your mole thinks it is too complicated. My mole has strong editorial instincts. I redrew it with 3 colors and fewer ways to misunderstand me. Mogu climbed onto the board and sniffed toward the western shelf. He struck the wood 3 times. The ground map returned behind my eyes, wider and rougher than before. A fracture ran above the main sleeping row like a dark hook. Fresh grit slid from one cracked support. LOH shift, likely. Before next storm, 11 hours. Rin read my face before she read the timer I copied onto the board. Can you hold it? Not alone. Correct answer. She planted her hammer beside the map. Prove one roof stays up, and then you can explain the rest of your drawings. I gave her the chalk. Show me where my map is wrong. Rin marked 2 buried ledges and a support line I had missed. The first cold raindrop struck the board between our hands. Another hit Mogu's head and flattened one patch of cocoa fur. Thunder rolled over the north rim far earlier than Sora's weather tally predicted. Mogu raced to the cracked support and tapped again. The hidden fracture flashed behind my eyes as water entered its upper edge. Load shift. Likely before next storm, 3 hours. The storm had stopped being tomorrow's problem. Rain rattled across the patched canvas while I nailed the audit board beneath the common's only solid awning. The numbers were large enough to read from the ring of stones. Residents, 92. Safe sleeping spaces, 51. Food reserve, 4.2 days. Public settlement rank F. Household stewards crowded close without surrendering their marked places in the ring. Some stared at the 51 beds, others stared at the food clock. Nobody stared at me, which meant the board was doing its job. We need emergency shores before the fracture shifts. Rin set 3 cut timbers under the awning. Their ends looked almost identical until she laid Taro's 3 measuring rods across them. One timber matched the stone right cubit. One matched the crown survey foot. One matched the caravan rod used by the families who had arrived last winter. Each crew had repaired shelters with the standard it had inherited from a different institution. The resulting parts were honest, careful, and incompatible. Nobody cuts another brace from a remembered length, I said. Taro folded his arms over his indigo vest. Which remembered lengths becomes law? None of them. I placed the straightest iron root offcut on the board. We establish one local datum against bedrock, make identical working rods, and record how each old unit converts. And when you leave? A foxfolk mason asked. The rods stay, the benchmarks stay, and Taro owns the standard. Taro's pale gray eyes sharpened at the word owns. Rin owns structural benchmarks, he said. Then we write both names. Saya unfolded her deep indigo wings beneath the awning and listened toward the sleeping shelf. Your surface map also ends where the rock begins. Can you extend it? She flicked 2 small stones into separate gallery mouths. The returning echoes reached her patterned wings as visible tremors. I can tell you which hidden void will make your straight benchmark dishonest. Then Saya owns subsurface extensions. The first shared rod began as a strip of iron root timber. Taro planed one face, while Rin chose a stable bedrock point above the storm runoff. I transferred the benchmark with a water level made from clear salvage tubing. Saya checked that our line did not cross an unseen cavity. 3 crews copied the rod at separate benches. We marked every copy with 1 long groove, 2 short grooves, and Taro's square material stamp. Red tags closed structures that could not survive the storm. Yellow tags required inspection after every load. Green tags meant tested, recorded, and assigned to a maintainer. Garo moved families from red shelters while complaining that colors did not stop stones. They stop people sleeping under stones we already know will fall. That is annoyingly difficult to argue with. The 3 crews carried their independently cut braces to Taro's test frame. The first slid between the guides without shaving. The second locked against the bearing plate. The third seated flush enough that Rin could not pass a knife tip through the joint. Part fit success, 3 of 3. The next crew copied the joint after 1 demonstration instead of 3 corrections. Rin tested their work, nodded once, and carved her maintainer mark beside Taro's. Green-gold lines spread from the bedrock benchmark into all 3 rods. The light did not crown me or descend from the sky. It followed tool marks, names, and the hands holding the tested parts. Foundation node, commendation. Civic Learning 7122s. I spread the support plan across a crate and pointed to the cracked row. We replaced the outer posts first, then move inward before the rain peaks. Rin took my chalk without asking. She drew force arrows from the overhang through the existing supports. Remove those 3 first and the shelf unloads sideways. Her chalk line drove straight through the sleeping row. The crack opens before your new posts take weight. I followed her sequence twice and found no clever defense for mine. Then my schedule is wrong. Several residents glanced at one another. I wiped away my arrows and wrote beneath hers, KO designer, Ren. We evacuate first, add temporary triangles without unloading anything, and build permanent buttresses after the storm. Rin returned the chalk. Now your schedule might leave us alive. Lightning flashed over the quarry rim before we finished distributing the first brace bundles. Water poured through an old crack above the western shelf. Stone dust sifted over 20 sleeping spaces in a pale sheet. Garo struck the muster bell 3 times. Western row out by households. The wolfkin who had called infrastructure cowardice carried 2 children and a ledger box under 1 arm. Rin's crew planted emergency triangular shores against existing bearings. Other crews stacked interlocking crib walls from measured timber and rubble. I tied red cloth around every temporary support. These keep people alive tonight. They are not the finished repair. Mogu vanished into the drainage-softened soil beside the shelf. His palm-width tunnel followed the hidden fracture rather than trying to break new stone. Each tap struck my survey sense like a pin landing on a dark map. The crack split around 1 iron root post, rejoined above another, and narrowed near Rin's planned buttress key. Brace 4 takes load next. Tara's crew drove the measured wedge. Hold 4 and seat 6. Rainwater burst from the fracture and turned the dust into ochre paste. A timber cracked with a sound too sharp to mistake for thunder. The outer edge of the overhang dropped several centimeters. People screamed from the last shelter alcove. The nearest permanent-looking post folded at its old splice. 1 temporary crib wall caught the descending shelf. Its top course crushed halfway through, then stopped. Move now, Garo roared. A badgerfolk healer guided an elder over the raised planks. An antelope guard held the canvas aside for a batfolk cook carrying the final food chest. Nobody's profession matched the lazy assumptions I had brought from a world without beastfolk. The last household cleared the row. Rin planted both hands against the trembling crib and watched its crushed top block. It caught 1 drop. We don't ask it for a second. We spent the remaining storm hours in the common, listening to measured supports complain. Mogu crawled from his pilot tunnel soaked and shaking. I wrapped him in the dry inside of my jacket. He had mapped the load, but the people and timber had carried it. At first light, the rain thinned to silver threads. The emergency shores still stood. Nobody called that a victory. Rin walked the full shelf with plumb cords and tapped every bearing before allowing repair crews back beneath it. She directed the unload sequence one support at a time. We removed damaged posts only after paired temporary shores took their weight. Crews excavated 2 buttress keys down to the bedrock benchmarks. Rubble filled the cores and compacted lifts rather than being dumped into decorative piles. Taro replaced the undersized bearing with 3 standardized iron root members clamped as one assembly. Saya checked the hidden ledge after each lift by echo. Mogu traced the fracture and warned us whenever a blow made it widen. By midday, 2 broad rubble buttresses leaned into the overhang like stone shoulders. They were ugly in the reliable way I had always preferred. We stacked sealed water barrels across the repaired sleeping shelf. Each barrel added a known test load. Rin hung plumb cords from 3 points and marked their starting positions against the common datum. Then we waited one full watch. Children resumed a dice game outside the red line. Sora counted every worker hour against the shrinking food reserve. Taro sharpened tools without taking his eyes off the cords. I checked them often enough that Rin finally covered one mark with her palm. Watching harder does not reduce deflection. That feels like a flaw in the profession. Mogu placed an approving pebble beside her hand. At the end of the watch, the cords remained inside Rin's limit. We removed the test barrels in reverse order. The shelf did not rebound, twist, or shed fresh dust. Rin carved her crew's mark into the buttress maintenance stone. The shelter households crossed the red line only after Rin changed their tags to green. The permanent load path glowed green gold from bedrock to bearing. Collapse in DT6, 93%, 24%, safe sleeping spaces, 15-273, foundation node, load path. Civic Learning, 1.1276. Resident Troost, 18-34. Mogu touched the new maintenance stone, and my underground map expanded beyond the shelter row. For the first time, I could read 20 meters of connected ground while he remained in contact with a working node. The map showed every brace foot, every buried ledge, and every shallow seep beneath the west shelf. It did not give me solutions. It gave the crews a shared place to test them. Taro copied the final bearing dimensions onto a board beside the sleeping entrance. Rin scheduled the first morning inspection and the next barrel test after heavy rain. The node remained bright only after both names and both duties were visible. No one knelt. No one called me chosen. An exhausted fox folk mason carried her bedding back inside and argued with Taro about the cleanest inspection mark. That was what adoption looked like. Rin pressed one charcoal and cream palm against the finished buttress. Now it will hold. Her words settled through the camp more completely than any cheer. For one quiet minute, 73 safe beds were simply 73 safe beds. Then Mogu tapped the wet ground behind the new buttress. Runoff had pooled where the permanent stone redirected the slope. Brown water curled around the lower shelter posts and cut small channels toward the store. Demch Faium Tassi F. Water. The strongest wall in Hollowmere had protected the beds by pushing the storm into the food. Green gold light moved beneath the buttress in clean lines. It passed under the ring of stones and bent toward the black mercy marker. Rigid violet charcoal grooves flashed across the marker's face. Most of the node light vanished uphill. The hidden bond opened a 3-line accounting record. Foundation charge produced, 100. Foundation charge received, 29. Foundation charge diverted, 71. The work had produced 100 measured units, but Hollowmere retained only 29. Mogu sagged against the maintenance stone as if he had dug the entire buttress himself. He should have been tired. He should not have been nearly unconscious. Bella's field record later showed me what answered beyond the north rim. A royal instrument registered 1 cold pulse, while Hollomere's public rank remained F. In the moment, all I saw was Mogu struggling to lift his head. I carried him toward the dry sleeping row while the last rainwater drained from its roof. The storm had stopped. The new beds were dry. Every food sack in the lower store sat in rising brown water. Sora formed a chain before the water reached the second row of grain sacks. Adults passed the sacks uphill while children carried dry sealcloths and counted each bundle into her ledger. I set Mogu beside the flooded threshold and followed the tap spreading through my 20-meter ground red. Water pressed against the new buttress, spilled across the lower bench, and searched for every old wheel rut between it and the store. The repair had not created the rain. It had made the rain's next route impossible to ignore. Saya, I need contours beyond Mogu's range. She lifted her deep indigo wings into the drizzle. Then stop staring underground and watch where the surface is already answering you. Saya scattered pinches of pale quarry dust into the runoff. Thin white threads curved around stones and converged beside a collapsed cart road. Her row crew planted marked stakes along equal heights while I transferred them with the common datum rods. We cut shallow contour ditches above the shelters to intercept the slope water. A wide silt forebay slowed the first muddy surge before it reached any drain. Rubble drains carried filtered flow around the buttress rather than beneath it. Crews raised the busiest footpaths with flat quarry stone and left gaps for cross-drainage. The final overflow curved into a dead quarry cut east of the living area. Mogu piloted only the first meter beneath a blocked channel. Residents widened it, lined it, and gave Saya's route crew responsibility for clearing it after every storm. Garo watched brown water enter what everyone had started calling kais, not a ditch. That is visibly a ditch. It has a forebay, a decorated ditch. The last food sack left the lower store before water covered its bottom tie. Sora weighed the dampest grain instead of guessing from the stained cloth. This storm cost us no sealed food. She pointed at the new route. The old path averaged 11%. That was a saved resource, but the note had not passed a real load yet. We repaired through the night and waited for the next rain. It arrived the following afternoon as a gray curtain over the north rim. Water raced toward the western shelf. The contour ditches caught it first. The forebay filled with ochre silt and released a slower, clearer flow. Rubble drains carried the runoff around the sleeping row. Raised paths stayed above the shallow crossing points. Saya's overflow discharged into the dead quarry cut without eroding a new channel toward the camp. Household crews copied Saya's clearing marks onto their own sections without waiting for me. Flooded living area, 38% to 3%. Assorted food lost per storm, 11% to 2%. Foundation node, dry ground. Green gold light ran along every adopted drainage route. The node extended because the routes had maintainers, not because I had named them dramatically. Saya assigned one household to the upper contour, 2 to the forebay, and 1 rotating pair to the lower overflow. Each crew hung the green tag only after it could explain where blocked water would go next. One steward deliberately packed leaves into a test grate. The bypass carried the extra flow around it instead of flooding the path. Another crew removed the obstruction, weighed the trap silt, and wrote the cleanout interval on its board. The test changed the mood more than my original plan had. That was the 1.4 times learning effect in practice. Nothing appeared from nowhere. People simply stopped paying for the same mistake twice. The new overflow also scoured dirt from the dead cut. A clean gray-white band appeared beneath the ochre surface. Rin knelt in the rain and rolled the exposed material between her fingers. Beside it, a smooth blue-gray layer held water without dissolving. Sealing clay, she said. Saya cleared another handspan and uncovered the curved lip of an old dressed stone channel. Dry ground had exposed the materials for clean water. White horses appeared on the rim before we could sample the full seam. Vela descended the quarry road beneath a slate lavender hood, with 4 royal guards and a brass viewing lens. Rain beaded on her ash-blonde hair when she stopped beside the active drain. Permanent construction was prohibited here. Rin stood between her and the maintenance board. That drain is why 73 beds and every sealed grain sack are dry. Bella raised the viewing lens. An ivory appraisal card opened above the common where every household could see it. KAI, Combat Value 0, Mogu, Beast Rank F, Hollowmere Settlement Rank F. 2 guards laughed at the same 0 that had entertained the court. Mogu sat on the green gold maintenance stone while rainwater moved exactly where his useless little card said it should. Vela's lens recorded the node light, but the public result did not move. Unauthorized works carry a crown fine. Vela wrote the fine against Hollowmere. Sora opened her ledger before Vela finished the sentence. State the amount and the authority. I raised the copper seal between them. The temporary warden clause authorizes emergency survival works through dawn on day 12. Vela inspected the seal and found no convenient way around its text. Emergency stabilization only. Her lens moved toward the exposed quarry cut. Material below the condemned line remains worthless. Crown waste. I turned the seal over and read the salvage clause aloud. A temporary warden may remove worthless crown waste needed for provisional survival. One guard stopped laughing. Vela's olive eyes narrowed. Take all the rubble your 0-rank settlement can carry. Thank you for the permit. I said it politely enough to make it worse. Mogu pressed his 3 front claws against the ceiling clay. A private map unfolded through the exposed layers. 7 material signatures lit the quarry wall in different bands. Salvage zone detected. Stabilized as spring clay. Iron root support timber. Waste-in bearing marl. Foundation material classes, 7. Vela saw only Mogu with his nose against mud. I saw a water seal, replacement shores, ventilation fittings, workshop stock, and something on the private map that carried a route signature I had never encountered. The humiliation lasted less than a minute. The access it bought reached through half the condemned quarry. Orin approached with a wrapped strip of cracked slate held against his moss-gray shell. Before the crown called this waste, Hollowmere held a freehold charter. He set the slate beside the warden's seal. Faded lines recorded property beneath the condemned boundary. Improvements made below that line belong to the resident freehold if continuous maintenance can be proven. The Crown expects nobody here to build permanent works. The Crown prohibited permanent works, then used the absence of permanent works as proof that we had abandoned the property. Orin tapped the duplicate ledgers hanging from his sash. It was elegant theft. The common datum boards, maintainer names, and inspection marks suddenly meant more than safety. They could become a legal chain of continuous use. Mogu trotted east toward the condemned gallery entrance. Black iron survey nails studded the sealed stone like thorns. He touched one, then struck the ground in a rapid pattern. My hidden map followed a damp seam through unstable galleries. A blue-green spring eye pulsed behind them. The route crossed old supports, a dead-air pocket, and one mass too dense for Mogu to identify. Saya crouched at the threshold and released a thread of ash into the opening. The thread drifted inward, rose, and then hung motionless where our lantern might ended. The gallery is breathing badly, she said. Rin examined the first iron root support without crossing the condemned line. And someone shaved that bearing after installation. Charlotte pointed to a mineral stain that ran toward the hidden spring. Anything disturbed inside must stay outside the clean water boundary until I test it. Garo rolled one shoulder beneath his armor. So the mole found water behind bad air, bad timber, poison, and something large. That is the optimistic reading. The crew did not volunteer because I inspired them. They volunteered because the spring, salvage rights, and evidence now belonged to the same route. Extending the drainage ditch would not reach it. We needed an expedition with people who understood stone, air, injury, and danger. Vela's brass lens flashed from behind us. A second unexplained node pulse had reached her instrument while Hollowmere remained publicly F. She entered something into her field record and marked my name with the symbol for suspected rank tax evasion. Mogu hooked both front paws around one survey nail. He rocked backward until the spike came free with a metallic squeal. That is crown property. Vela's warning arrived too late. Mogu stuffed the black nail beneath my jacket and sat on the opening. The tiny violet crown stamp on its head began to glow. My private map joined the nail, the mercy marker, and the hidden spring eye with one rigid violet charcoal direction line. Orin recognized the stamp as crown route notation from the year Hollowmere was reclassified as a refugee camp. Across the common, the grooves in the black mercy marker pulsed at the exact same time. At dawn, Sora tied 5 ration packets to 5 separate rescue cords. If you lose a person, a tool, or a packet, I want to know which line failed. She kept the 6th packet and the surface ledger beside the condemned entrance. I entered with Mogu, Rin, Saya, Charlotte, and Garo. Rin carried the common datum rod and a mason's hammer. Saya carried chalk plates, echo stones, and a folded cloth duct. Charlotte carried test files, sealed sample bags, and more bandages than Garo found flattering. Garo carried a shield, a hooked staff, and the local knowledge required to distinguish a warning roar from a charge. I carried the copper seal, the stolen survey nail, and an unjustified hope that my first dungeon would respect building regulations. Mogu carried himself and therefore considered our loads unequal. The condemned gallery swallowed daylight within 20 steps. Ochre walls narrowed around ironroot shores blackened by age. Pale gas lichen traced the lower stone in thin gray fans. Blue-green light from the hidden spring appeared only as a faint reflection on wet mineral seams. Saya raised one hand before anyone lit the second torch. The lichen ahead had faded from pearl to colorless white. She tossed an echo stone into the dark. It clicked once against the floor and returned no clean second sound. Dead air. Garo lowered his flint. I had mapped the corridor's shape through Mogu and still failed to see the most dangerous thing inside it. Saya knotted a pale cloth strip to her echo rod and extended it through the threshold. The cloth hung without moving. There is an old ventilation shaft above the left wall, Rin said. She pointed to a row of plugged tool holes hidden under mineral crust. Mogu traced the shaft's lower bend with a brief survey echo. Residents on the surface opened the known cap under Sora's supervision. We fitted Saya's cloth duct to a hand bellows and fed fresh air toward the dead pocket. 2 people worked the bellows while 2 rested, because ventilation that depended on exhaustion was another kind of trap. Saya lit a pinch of smoke at the safe edge. The first test cleared too slowly. She shortened one bend in the duct and sealed a leaking joint with clay. The second smoke thread crossed the gallery and vanished up the open shaft within her marked interval. The gas lichen regained a pale green edge. She repeated the test before allowing us across. SAFE air changes verified 2. Serious injuries 0. Saya wrote the time, bellows crew, and next inspection on a slate at the entrance. A complete map includes what you cannot see, she said. I am adding air to my list of structurally important invisible things. Put people at the top. Beyond the dead air pocket, a band of pale jade marl ran through the right wall. I stepped toward it. Rin caught the back of my jacket. A roof slab above the seam carried 3 old chisel marks. 2 formed a proper royal bearing symbol. The third had been cut shallow to disguise an undersized support. The quarry crew marked this for replacement, Rin said. Someone polished out the rejection slash and left the timber. She braced the exit side before touching the valuable stone. Rin loaded the brace with a screw jack, watched the roof seam close, and only then allowed Saya to collect a marl sample. The corridor widened into a work chamber littered with cracked ceramic collars. Mogu's ears flattened. A dry crystal hiss filled the chamber. Dozens of glassy mites emerged from a rubble pile and turned toward the vibration of Garo's boots. He swung his staff at the first cluster, struck mites scattered into sharper fragments, and drew twice as many from the cracks. Stop hitting individuals, Saya said. Garo planted his shield instead. Mogu tapped the floor and showed me a shallow recess behind the rubble. It had one narrow mouth and no path toward the spring seam. They follow rhythm. Garo struck his shield with the staff in 3 slow beats. The mites changed direction together. He backed toward the recess and repeated the pattern. Mogu scratched a pilot groove from the swarm's edge to the bait pocket. The crystal bodies flowed after the measured knocks like filings toward a magnet. Saya dropped a fitted stone shutter when the last cluster crossed the lip. Rin sealed its edge with wet clay. The chamber became quiet except for Garo's breathing. My defense instructor never covered organized retreat from angry jewelry. Your instructor lacked range. Garo laughed once, then rubbed the exposed fur above his glove. Red irritation spread along his wrist. Charlotte intercepted him before he touched his face. She rinsed the area into a sealed bowl and examined one captured mite through clear glass. Dark mineral residue pulsed inside its transparent shell. It fed on poisoned runoff from that seam. She treated Garo's skin with a neutralizing paste and bagged his outer glove. Charlotte marked every contaminated tool with violet cord. Nothing wearing this cord crosses the clean water line. She pointed to an untainted blue-gray band beside the poisoned seam. That clay remained isolated. The hazard had identified the safest sealing material. Mogu's map showed 2 possible paths toward the spring. The left route curved around the load-bearing ridge. The right route cut directly through a short gallery beneath it. The short route saves half a day. Rin placed her common datum rod across the doorway and sighted along the roof. It also removes the till holding the upper gallery. Mogu reads solid stone above it. Mogu reads material and voids. She tapped a diagonal tool scar on the wall. This gallery was cut after the upper chamber loaded the ridge from the other side. I had treated the current shape as the complete history. Rin had read the sequence that created it. Mogu picked up a small black pebble. He placed it precisely on the short route in my chalk plan. 2 votes against. Rin folded her arms. Your mole has seniority. I erased the shortcut. We followed the longer path until a cracked stone bridge crossed a shallow extraction trench. Rin proposed a controlled test load before the whole crew crossed. We stacked 2 measured stone baskets on the bridge and ran plumb cords from its underside. Mogu touched the abutment. Pressure gathered behind my eyes as a field of blurred lines. At first, every crack looked equally important. The loaded bridge settled by 1 mark. 1 pale line remained still, while the others shifted around it. Stone pressure and a faint mana current converged along the same seam. My sight narrowed until only that weakness remained. SKIL fault site. Valid targets, observed under load. The skill did not tell me how to repair the bridge. It showed the one place where a valid repair could change the result. I marked the seam. Rin checked it with her hammer, adjusted my line by 2 fingers and approved a paired brace below the deck. We reloaded the bridge. Its deflection fell inside her crossing limit. Revised route accepted, Rin said. My first personal skill had become useful only after somebody corrected it. The spring's blue-green light brightened beyond the bridge. So did a low grinding sound. We entered a circular chamber whose floor sloped toward a sealed stone eye. A compact ram slept beside the spring barrier with granite plates layered across its back. Its iron-gray jaw rested on 2 folded legs. Moss filled the seams between its plates, and one curled horn had crushed an old ore cart flat. A private appraisal formed above it. Iron Jaw Quarry Ram, Beast Rank B. Garo slowly raised his shield. The Iron Jaw opened one amber eye. Its first charge crossed the chamber faster than its stone body had any right to move. Garo deflected the horn with his shield and rolled behind a pillar. The impact split the shield rim and left the ram's face unmarked. Rin's hammer strike glanced from a shoulder plate without chipping it. The Iron Jaw turned toward the repeated sound and pawed the floor. It follows strong rhythm, Garo said, and direct attacks make stronger rhythm. Charlotte stood at the blue line she had painted around the spring eye. Nobody kills it in this chamber. She pointed to the slope beneath the ram. Crush that body over the spring, and we poisoned the source with blood, mites, and shattered mineral plate. The objective changed from defeating a beast to relocating one. Saya mapped an unused side gallery through Echo. Garo remembered an old handling rule from quarry livestock crews. Ironjaws commit to a beat, but they hate uncertain footing. Rin identified a shallow, dry shelf beyond the clean water boundary. The shelf had once held waste carts and ended at a restraint pocket with intact gate sockets. Mogu projected a brief second survey echo through the dry ground. The image flickered, doubled, and vanished before he could maintain a tunnel. It was enough to confirm the pocket remained open. I watched the ram strike the floor again. Fault Sight traced a pale line across the loaded edge of the dry shelf. We did not need to drop the beast into a pit. We needed the shelf to settle one controlled step after it crossed. Saya established 3 signal rhythms. 1 knock meant advance. 2 meant hold. 3 rapid knocks meant abandon the plan. Garo became the visible target with his damaged shield. Rin's crew erected a sacrificial timber screen well away from the spring. Its members were deliberately weaker than the permanent gate frame behind it. Charlotte painted the clean water exclusion line across every boot and tool route. Mogu traced the existing restraint pocket and marked its closed corners. I isolated the shelf seam only after Rin loaded it with a stone basket. We cut relief slots along the pale fault sight line and left 2 measured stone keys intact. The Ironjaw heard Garo's first shield beat. its head lowered. Garo struck again and retreated behind the sacrificial screen. The ram charged. Saya gave one knock. Garo cleared the marked lane. The iron jaw shattered the screen exactly where Rin had weakened it. Broken timber stole part of its speed without changing its direction. It crossed the dry shelf. Mogu struck the ground once. Rin's crew pulled the first stone key. I called the second when fault sight showed the load transfer complete. The isolated shelf settled half a meter into the restraint pocket. Dust filled the chamber, but the spring-side floor did not move. The iron jaw stumbled onto its knees and rose uninjured inside the old gate sockets. Taro's standardized timber gates dropped into place from both sides. The beast rammed one gate. Load spread through the paired braces and into intact dry rock. The frame held. Saya sounded 2 knocks. Every hand stopped at once. True, injuries. 0, serious. Charlotte checked the spring boundary before she checked our smiles. No dust plume, contaminated tool, or crystal mite had crossed her blue line. Rin measured the chamber after the controlled settlement. The spring barrier remained plumb. Garo spent the next hour feeding calm shield taps toward the reopened side gallery. We raised one gate and gave the iron jaw a clear uphill lane. The beast followed the slow rhythm out of the restraint pocket. It stopped once beside Garo, shook stone dust across his armor, and continued into an empty gallery beyond the water route. Limited acknowledgement, I said. Garo wiped gray powder from his muzzle. I preferred the mites. With the beast relocated, Rin removed the old blocking stones around the spring eye. Blue-green water welled into a natural basin behind them. Charlotte filled 3 clear vials before anyone filled a cup. She measured turbidity, checked the mineral reaction, and sealed a sample for comparison after construction. Open does not mean ready to drink, nobody argued. Spring access, open. We spent the remaining daylight sorting the quarry's usable stock. Sealing clay-filled marked bins rather than one damp heap. Pale jade marl came out on separate sledges. Crews recovered intact iron root links, ceramic pipe collars, bronze ventilation plates, and enough resonance nails to make Mogu visibly reconsider his career. Half a waystone survey plate emerged from behind the spring barrier. It was pale jade, with 7 empty radial grooves and a broken coordinate ring. When I placed it beside the stolen nail, 3 unfamiliar numbers lit along its edge. They were not local map coordinates. They used the same dimensional notation as the restricted summoning clause on my warden seal. The plate did not open a route. It proved the quarry had once measured one. Sora sent a charcoal rubbing of the numbers to Orin at the surface. He returned it with the original freehold fragment laid beside the coordinate ring. 1 broken charter symbol and 1 waystone groove shared the same route notation. The ownership mystery and the path home mystery had been recorded by the same vanished survey office. Salvage recovered, 14.8 tons. KI level 1 to 3. Mogu. Survey Icho range 20 to 45 meters. The longer echo remained temporary. Mogu could still maintain only 1 pilot path, and the public card still called him F. The hidden bond offered Rin, Saya, Charlotte, and Garo candidate crew status. No link activated without an explanation and a later choice. The result belonged to their formation before it belonged to my level. Vela arrived at the quarry mouth with 2 guards and a rescue litter. She stopped when Garo led the uninjured Ironjaw across a distant side gallery. She looked from Charlotte's sealed samples to Rin's load marks and Saya's air test slate. Sora handed her the complete incident ledger from the surface table. "You brought the litter for whom?" Sora asked. Vela walked the incident route herself. Saya showed her the air slate. Rin showed her 2 load marks. Charlotte showed her sealed samples. Garo showed her the reopened path the Ironjaw had taken. 4 independent records described one operation, and none depended on my private status screen. Mogu, BES rank F, Hollowmere, settlement rank F. The royal card could deny the public rank. It could not make 4.8 tons of sorted material disappear. Crews pulled sledges past Vela toward the surface. The recovered stock could build a protected spring, a pantry, a workshop line, and an ash refuge. Then Taro's message came down the rescue cord. Hollowmere had 1 damaged forge, 4 incompatible tong sizes, and no shared fitting gauge for the recovered collars. Our material bottleneck had become a tool bottleneck before the first sledge reached daylight. I returned to the spring barrier and fitted the halfway stone plate into an old recess. Its broken coordinate ring glowed faintly. Behind the blue-green spring eye, rigid violet charcoal conduit lines curled around every crown survey nail. Green-gold node light entered those geometric channels and moved uphill toward the mercy marker. The quarry had not merely been abandoned. It had been wired to feed something above it. Charlotte stopped the first spring sledge at the central bench and drew a blue line across its path. "Clean material stays on this side." She tied violet cord around 2 tools that had entered the poisoned quarry seam. "Those go to the isolation rack." One worker started toward the existing waste pits with a bag of mite-contaminated clay. Charlotte redirected him downhill before he crossed the clinic path. The camp already boiled drinking water and cleaned its cooking tools. The problem was that its waste pits, refuse line, and laundry runoff sat inside the spring's underground recharge boundary. No amount of careful boiling changed what flowed through the ground before reaching the pot. Mogu touched the exposed sealing clay beside the common. His taps traced seep paths between the western shelf and the blue-green spring eye. I transferred those paths onto Saya's contour map as a hydraulic gradient. Charlotte moved 3 of my proposed exclusion stakes before I finished placing them. That line protects the spring but blocks the only level clinic route. She shifted the boundary around a stable bench and kept the path accessible to wheels, hooves, folded wings, and tired bodies. Water protection is useless if injured residents cannot reach it. Your line replaces mine. My health practice replaces yours. My line was never health practice. Good. Rin watched us revise the map and hid a smile behind one cream-striped hand. Charlotte chose the sanitation distance, the cleaning schedule, and every material allowed near food crops. I calculated slope and capacity from her boundaries. Mogu checked the unseen seep routes. The first crew closed the uphill pits without simply burying their contents. Sealed containers moved the waste to a down-gradient site outside the mapped recharge area. Crews built dry vault latrines on stone pads with clay-sealed chambers. Contained leachate drained into removable vessels rather than the soil. Covered refuse vaults kept rain from turning waste into runoff. Hand-washing stands sat between sanitation exits and the living paths. A protected clinic lane connected Charlotte's shelter to the sealed spring worksite. Every station displayed a maintainer name and a backup. Garo inspected one vault and looked disappointed by its lack of tactical drama. Will this stop an ashhorn? Only if the ashhorn reads the cleaning rota. Then our defense remains incomplete. Charlotte handed him a scrub brush. Your training begins now. The veteran cleaned the hand-washing stand while a Wolfkin bookkeeper corrected his record mark. Nobody treated sanitation as a miracle from another world. They treated it as a system that had finally been given enough material, space, and authority to work. Charlotte sampled the old clinic path and the new boundary after the first full sanitation cycle. The test strip over the old seep line darkened immediately. The strip beyond the sealed vault remained pale. Surface contamination. Hitched allow. Daily contamination exposures, 17 to 5. Foundation note, clean boundary. Green gold light outlined the sanitation boundary and stopped precisely at the named maintenance limits. Charlotte's rota crew followed it without asking where I wanted them. That no did not belong to me enough for me to interfere. The sealed spring took the rest of day 3 and most of day 4. Mogu ran a narrow inspection route beside the natural chamber and stopped before his pilot tunnel could widen the spring seam. Residents enlarged only the dry access section by hand. Rin's crew keyed dressed stone into intact quarry walls rather than stacking a decorative shell around broken rock. They pressed blue-gray ceiling clay over surface cracks that had carried dirty runoff into the chamber. A low stone weir held a stable draw level. A separate overflow channel carried excess water away from the slope and the western shelters. Saya poured a full barrel through the overflow test while Rin watched for erosion. The outfall apron spread the flow across flat rubble without cutting a new channel. A ceramic cleanout port gave Charlotte access to the settling pocket. A marked fill line recorded how quickly the protected basin recovered after each draw. The covered draw point kept buckets and hands out of the spring chamber. Hollowmere's existing boiling practice remained in place. Clean source protection supported good habits instead of pretending to invent them. Charlotte rejected our first cover because one hinge trapped grit above the opening. Taro recut the fitting against the common datum gauge. The replacement opened, drained, and locked without shedding debris. Rin assigned a spring crew for daily fill readings and weekly cleanout inspection. Charlotte named 2 assistants to run the water tests when she was treating patients. Only after the overflow, fill line, turbidity, and cleaning routes passed did residents draw their first covered vessel. Charlotte tested it in front of the ring. Then Sora tested the recorded volume against the ration plan. Then 3 households repeated the draw without our help. The method worked in hands that had never heard my explanation. Foundation node, sealed spring. The first health result was not a magical wave of recovered patients. Charlotte made us wait 48 hours. She counted every clinic visit linked to water and surface contamination across 2 full daily cycles. The older cases still needed treatment. New exposure fell as the protected routes remained clean under normal use. Charlotte compared one covered spring vessel with water collected from the old surface seep. The seep sample clouded after a single shake. The spring vessel stayed clear through the same test. She handed both to a Badgerfolk assistant and made him repeat the full procedure without prompts. He labeled the samples, recorded the fill time, cleaned the draw handle, and caught one mistake in Charlotte's own shorthand. She corrected the board in front of everyone. The next assistant performed the test while Charlotte treated a miner across the clinic path. No part of the system waited for its most skilled person to return. Rin checked the keyed stone after the basin refilled. Saya inspected the overflow after a household laundry cycle. Sora measured the usable daily volume against 92 residents instead of declaring the spring infinite. Each specialist signed only the results she had actually tested. The sealed spring remained one node because their separate work met at one maintained boundary. Waiter, related clinic. Intake after 48 hours, 17 per day to 5 per day. Children filled covered pitchers from the draw point without crossing a waste path. 2 recovering stonecutters returned for light-duty sorting after Charlotte cleared them. The labor gain was visible, but it belonged to cleaner exposure and 2 days of maintained practice. For one meal, the camp ate beside the filled spring vessels and discussed which household had forgotten a cleanout mark. The argument sounded almost luxurious. Then both new nodes pulsed beneath our feet. Green-gold light ran from the sanitation boundary and the spring chamber toward the common. Rigid violet charcoal lines ignited inside the mercy marker. Most of the light disappeared uphill again. Mogu had excavated less than he had during the quarry expedition. He still collapsed beside the spring maintenance stone. I caught him before his head struck the pavement. His topaz eyes remained open, but his 3 front claws trembled against my palm. I placed the stolen resonance nail beside the glowing marker and measured the pulses against the node records. Every working node reported the same missing share. Foundation charge produced, 100. Foundation charge received, 29. Foundation charge diverted, 71. Hollowmere had created the work. Something beyond Hollowmere received more than twice what remained. Rin crouched beside me while Mogu slept inside my jacket. Is the bond consuming him? No. I turned the copied pulse record toward her. The bond is measuring the theft. The black marker carried the same tiny crown root stamp as the nail. We had a ratio and a route, but not yet the receiving end. Vela's lens archive later showed me what happened while I counted the missing charge. Inside the capital training court, the summoned students drank blue crown elixirs beneath ivory banners. Royal resonance pylons formed a bright ring around Clion and the Stormmane lion. Cyan lightning doubled across the lion's white mane when the pylons activated. Clion drove his spear into a stone target and split it from top to base. Klien, level 12. Stormman output, 1.9s. Royal witnesses called Clion their chosen champion. Akino stood inside the ring in her wine magenta coat and declared him the leader of the drill. Her royal chorus gathered the genuine public endorsement into a violet rhythm around the formation. The students moved sooner, and the Stormmane's lightning landed in tighter sequence. The amplified cadence also drove visible cracks through the training ground. Dust fell from support joints along the outer ridge. Clion looked only at the shattered target. Varen looked toward a separate instrument registering Hollowmere's foundation pulses without public tax revenue. After the drill, Akino placed a worn phototransit card on the royal desk. The image showed her beside the younger brother who depended on her back on Earth. When does champion status let me inspect the Earth records? After day 12, a crown official answered. She closed her hand around the card and returned to Clion's formation. Her reason for choosing the fastest official route home was real. What she had done to me in public remained real too. Varen gave Vela 2 orders before the archive ended. Monitor the 0-rank warden. Reduce Hollowmere's ration wagon until the camp remembers its dependents. Back at Hollowmere, Sora discovered the cut before the wagon reached our road. She placed the crown delivery seals on one side of her balance and the old caravan weights on the other. Taro verified the balance beam against his salvaged royal gauge. The balance settled without trembling. Orin matched each wax seal to a dated duplicate receipt. Sora opened one intact sack in front of 3 household witnesses and poured its grain through a calibrated measure. The 7th measure filled cleanly. The 8th did not cover the bottom. She repeated the test with a second sealed sack from a different delivery week. The shortage remained the same. The royal ledger claimed 10 measures of grain per shipment. The sealed sacks consistently contained 7. She checked the result against 3 prior deliveries and Oren's duplicate receipts. Crown, grain, missing, 30%. Nobody in the ring looked ashamed of a short pantry after that. Their private shortage had become evidence of a public crime. Clean water restored workers, but faster construction consumed stores already reduced by the crown's theft. The ring gave Sora authority to build the living pantry. Food reserve, 4.2 days to 3.1 days. Time to Red Moon, 6 days. The water problem had released labor directly into a food crisis. Sora laid the false ration seals beside Mogu's stolen survey nail. Both carried the same crown root mark. Sora stood behind the forged ration seals, which remained on the central stone like knives. 31 household markers circled her beneath the first clear sky Hollowmere had seen in days. She opened the crown ledger, set her own weight records beside it, and read both columns aloud. The Royal Depot claimed it had delivered 10 grain measures for every 7 that had reached us. For months, families had blamed their own cooks, storekeepers, and hungry children for the missing food. Now the lie sat in the sunlight where every household could weigh it. Nobody cheered when Sora finished. The anger was too precise for cheering. Rin rolled up her sleeves and asked how much work that anger could buy before supper. Sora's turquoise eyes narrowed with satisfaction. Enough to collect what they stole first. Vela arrived at the ring with 2 guards and her brass viewing lens already raised. Sora did not accuse her in private. She made the surveyor stand where all 31 stones could witness the answer. One false seal carried the same tiny crown root mark as Mogu's stolen survey nail. The second matched a relief wagon that had supposedly spoiled 3 valleys away. Orin recited the depot clause that made an active fraud inquiry part of the royal record. Vela stared at the households, the seals, and the lens archive she could no longer quietly erase. She ordered the guards to open the relief shed beside the north road. A covered cart rolled down the switchback before noon. Sora broke its wax herself, then weighed every sack in front of the ring. The withheld grain equaled 2.7 real ration days. That number did not solve the red moon. It proved starvation had been used as a leash. The recovered sacks entered the store under 3 separate signatures. Sora then led us to a warm granary where damp air silvered the wall behind the bins. Our remaining grain was not vanishing through magic. It was feeding mold, insects, and badly placed condensation. Mogu pressed his nose to the terrace floor and tapped a slow path toward the eastern slope. His one pilot tunnel traced the coolest dry void without disturbing the cracked stone above it. Saya checked the hollow through airflow holes and rejected the first chamber for a hidden seep line. Rin approved a smaller stable pocket farther uphill. The crews widened only that section with hand tools and shored each step before taking another. Taro fired ceramic liners while Sora marked every batch weight in mustard-colored chalk. Stone plinths lifted the new bins above the cold floor. Sealed lids kept crawling pests away from grain without trapping moisture inside. Drain channels carried condensation around the cellar instead of through it. Charlotte chose clean substrate beds for mooncaps already nearing maturity. Nobody pretended mushrooms could create food from an empty cave. They converted prepared waste and stored growing material into measured meals. Sprouting racks turned a planned portion of grain into greens rather than multiplying the original weight. Enclosed cricket bins used scraps that could not safely return to human plates. Sora weighed the inputs before anyone weighed the harvest. The first storage cycle lasted long enough for impatience to become its own camp rumor. Mogu spent it glaring at one damp corner until a crew corrected the drainage slope. The second cycle survived a warm spell and a night of heavy fog. Sora finally carried her scales into the common and hung the results from the bell frame. Wood-held ration recovered 2.7 days. Storage loss 19% to 3%. Prevented loss plus 1.2 days. Verified 6-day production plus 1.4 days. Projected edible food reserve 3.1 to 8.4 days. Foundation node, living pantry. Green gold lines warmed the cellar plinths and climbed the signed storage ledger. Sora checked the weights again before she allowed herself to smile. That evening, 92 residents received one ordinary full ration. The bowls held stew, sprouted greens, sliced mooncaps, and enough grain to stop counting spoonfuls. A batfolk cook slapped my hand away when I reached for the maintenance ledger. You can ruin breakfast with costs tomorrow. So I sat between Mogu and Rin and let the meal remain a meal. Children traded roasted crickets as if they were rare sweets. Orin quietly added the depot fraud to his duplicate archive. Sora watched every bowl empty without once looking toward Vela. For one night, Hollowmere ate without apologizing for being alive. The next morning, the south gate hinge snapped under a loaded handcart. Rin's crew found 3 replacement hinges and discovered that none shared the same pin width. Taro repaired the gate by filing one fitting entirely by hand. It took 94 minutes while work carts formed an angry line behind him. The pantry had given us labor capacity, and the broken hinge showed exactly where that capacity stopped. Every old workshop used a different inherited measure. Every repair depended on the one person who remembered which mistake fit which gate. We could not build an ash refuge or a migration defense that way. Taro unlocked a cedar case he had kept beneath his forge floor. Inside lay salvaged royal gauges wrapped in oilcloth and marked with his dismissed sergeant's stamp. He had been expelled for refusing fittings thinner than the quarry safety schedule allowed. Rin placed one of our common datum rods beside his oldest gauge. The marks disagreed by less than a fingernail, but that error multiplied across a loaded frame. We cross-marked every usable gauge against the bedrock benchmarks. Taro ground a master wedge template, while 2 apprentices copied the angle in scrapwood. Rin chose the hinge loads and refused my first pin thickness. Sora created a signed tool library with checkout times, repair costs, and a missing part column. Saya marked which gates had to remain compatible with stretchers and evacuation carts. Crews restored a treadle crusher so fittings no longer depended on hammering every plate from raw stock. Mogu sat beside the first production jig with his paws folded like a furious inspector. When a guide slipped out of square, he tapped the floor beneath it 3 times. Taro adjusted the stop and ran the piece again. Mogu provided the warning, but the apprentices made the correction. By sunset, rows of wedges, pins, hinge leaves, and brace shoes carried the same indigo stamp. Taro called the workshop Maker's Spine. The residents called it the wall Rin could fix without Kai. I lost that naming vote by 30 stones and 1 insulting pebble. The real test belonged to one signed apprentice. Taro stood outside the awning while she selected a gauge and cut a replacement hinge alone. Her fitting went first to the south gate. It seated without filing. The same pin fitted the clinic gate. Then it fitted the pantry gate. Repair time, 94 minutes to 17 minutes. Interchangeable part, success, 3 of 3. Foundation node, maker spine. The new node linked the forge, the signed tool wall, and 3 working gates in green gold light. Taro handed her the standards key instead of taking the hinge back from her. That gesture mattered more than my diagram. Mogu tried to connect everything before the light had settled. He ran from the forge to the pantry and drove a path toward the spring. His taps jumped next toward the shelter braces. 4 foundation pulses struck him almost together. His cream muzzle went gray beneath the dust. He took one more step, then collapsed beside the common datum post. The private card above him showed a hidden threshold nearly within reach. Uninterrupted shift to next stage. 3 hours 12 minutes. Time to Red Moon, 4 days 9 hours. I knew what 3 more hours could buy. 5 paths could survey the refuge before nightfall. A larger network could finish every design before the crown found another restriction. Mogu dragged one paw toward the shelter line. I picked him up instead. He bit my glove without enough strength to leave a mark. No. The word sounded small beside all those clocks. We do not build a home by working you unconscious inside it. I carried him to Charlotte while the hidden timer continued counting down. Rin did not tell me I had chosen correctly. She asked for my unfinished task list. Saya took the route checks. Sora assigned food and rest rotations. Taro divided the remaining fittings among his signed apprentices. Charlotte covered Mogu with a warmed cloth and ordered me away from her clinic table. The network dimmed without him. The work did not stop. Crews cleaned the pantry vents, logged the spring fill line, tested the new hinges, and inspected each shelter brace. Each maintainer signed the task they had actually completed. Nobody forged Mogu's approval or mine. The pantry pulse returned first under Sora's hand. The spring answered when Charlotte's assistant logged the draw point. The workshop answered when the apprentice closed the tool ledger. The shelters answered when Rin's night crew loaded the western brace. 7 separate nodes held without a single command from me. Mogu's hidden timer reached 0 and vanished without granting anything. For one cold minute, I thought I had denied him his only chance. Then the last maintainer pressed a marked thumb beside the load path record. The whole common gave one deep green gold pulse. Maintain nodes, 707. Resident trust, 48 to 54. Retained foundation charge, 210 of 210. The cloth on Charlotte's table lifted. Mogu stood where the palm-sized mole had been, now as large as a rabbit. His fur had warmed from cocoa to ochre. His shovel paws had widened, and thin amber tunnel lines spread under them. He looked at me, looked at the missed timer, and headbutted my wrist. Mogu, Foundation Mole. Private rank S, C active paths, 5. Network radius, 300 meters. Civic learning, 2.21 times. Public combat value, 0. The final line appeared twice, as if the royal card were proud of the joke. Mogu snorted and buried it beneath Charlotte's spare blanket. Hollowmere had not evolved him by exhausting him. It had evolved him by proving the work no longer depended on him. Outside, every mercy marker groove flashed violet charcoal. Vela raised her lens as the foundation pulse struck it hard enough to crack the outer glass. She arrived at the clinic with a royal order already unrolled. The crown would permit a legal stress test at Sunken Quarry. If we passed, Hollowmere could petition for D rank. If we failed, every permanent work would be demolished as an unauthorized hazard. The order listed falling stone, moving constructs, contaminated water, and ash-sealed refuge failure. We had gates that fitted, food that lasted, and 5 paths under Mogu's paws. We did not have one refuge that could keep Ash outside. We had 71 hours before the Sunken Quarry test, and no Ash safe room for 92 people. My first sketch was a sealed stone box with one protected intake and a narrow exhaust. Mogu placed an insulting pebble directly over the single intake. Saya agreed with him by drawing a collapse line through it. One blocked shaft would turn my refuge into a patient trap. Her wing scales trembled over the slope until she found 2 independent paths through stable ground. Mogu sent separate amber traces along both routes without widening either one. The intakes emerged low behind stone baffles on opposite sides of the gallery. Saya found a third shaft that rose through sound rock above the western shelf. Charlotte chose low-resistance wet wool filters that residents could replace without special tools. Taro built simple dampers from Maker's spine plates. Rin designed an earth berm over the chamber and keyed every new stone into the quarry ribs. A fire-warmed flue at the high shaft pulled stale air upward through thermal draft. Gas-lichened tiles changed color when carbon dioxide collected near the floor. Timed smoke jars gave us a real clearance test instead of a hopeful guess. I calculated the doorway from the widest handcart in Sora's inventory. Charlotte made us build the opening at full scale in timber before touching masonry. An elder with wide antlers struck the upper brace on the first pass. A mothfolk parent could not fold both wings while carrying a child. 2 clinic assistants failed to turn a loaded stretcher inside the entrance. My opening satisfied the written dimension and failed 3 actual bodies. The accessibility group collected 6 winning markers from the prototype failure betting pool. I had placed 4 of them against my own design. Rin asked whether losing money had finally improved my listening. I handed the chalk to the people the door had excluded. They lowered one threshold, widened the turn, shifted the handrail, and cut a protected antler recess. Charlotte added resting points at the intake bends and a low shelf for water and medicine. Saya moved the interior signal plate where someone lying down could see it. Rin checked every alteration against the load path before masonry began. The corrected timber template passed antlers, folded wings, carts, stretchers, and 2 assistants abreast. Only then did crews build the permanent entrance. They set memorial lintel stones above it for homes that had not survived earlier ash seasons. Nobody called the finished refuge mine. They called it Breath Hall. For the first smoke test, damp red ash filled the outer chamber until the daylight disappeared. The low baffles darkened while the protected intakes kept drawing. The flue fire warmed the exhaust shaft. Smoke ribbons climbed instead of pooling around the floor. Charlotte walked every alcove with a gas-lickened tile and a time slate. The shelter kept breathable air while 4 crews moved through it at once. Ace ash in effiltration, 64% to 6%. Verified air changes, 4.2 per/hour. Accessible capacity, 43 to 96. Foundation node, breath hall. Green gold lines passed through both intakes, crossed the widened threshold, and met at the high shaft. Charlotte signed as health custodian. The accessibility group signed the entry standard beside her. I signed the failed template and left it hanging on the wall. Breath hall's maintenance board carried more than a proud activation date. It listed filter washing after every ash alarm, damper checks each morning, and flue cleaning twice weekly. 2 teenagers demonstrated the color tiles while Charlotte watched without correcting them. An elder traced the widened turn with his cane and marked one rough edge for repair. The next crew smoothed it before sunset and entered the change under proven works. Nobody needed Mogu's power to replace wet wool or read a stained tile. That ordinary fact made the green gold node brighter than any sealed magical vault could have done. Rin also loaded the earth berm with water barrels for an entire watch. Saya blocked the eastern intake with a practice shutter and timed the western path alone. The refuge still cleared smoke, though the air change rate dropped exactly as our calculation predicted. Charlotte posted both numbers because emergency plans built on perfect conditions were only decorated lies. When the test families left, each alcove carried a maintainer's mark instead of my name. The royal order allowed 1 hour for the sunken quarry stress test. Bella brought 2 guild witnesses, 6 guards, and an ivory rank crystal under a striped canopy. The quarry floor had been divided into stone galleries, smoke lanes, sluice channels, and moving platforms. Wooden constructs waited on 3 levels, with blunt weapons painted royal blue. A live rock elk paced behind a breakaway gate. At the far end, the quarry warden stood twice as tall as Garo. The old golem was anchored to the floor by iron shoes and a control seal. 4 specialists gathered beside Mogu at the starting line. Rin accepted a voluntary link for structure and load. Saya accepted 1 for routes and signals. Charlotte accepted 1 for health and ecology. Garo accepted 1 for defense and evacuation. Mogu showed each of them an amber path that ended under their own hand. Any one of them could withdraw by lifting that hand from the marked ground. Bo wall unitary roll links, 4 ACT. Withdrawal access open. The first bell rang. Stone blocks dropped into the upper gallery. Smoke rolled across the middle lane. Colored water spilled into the clinic route. 3 constructs advanced from the lower ramp. I sent the same warning through Mogu to all 4 specialists. Left gate falling load, contaminated channel, moving threat, clear in 12 seconds. Rin heard a gate order without the support load. Saya heard a route closure without knowing which return lane mattered. Charlotte abandoned her cache because the word contaminated lacked a source. Garo met the first construct where the other 3 needed to cross. The left gate jammed halfway. Smoke flooded the lane Saya had chosen as the return route. Mogu's 5 amber paths flickered between 4 incompatible pictures. He buckled beneath the sensory load. A dropped block shattered the empty test frame beside Rin. Vela's first clerk raised a red failure flag. I had built role-specific links and then filled all of them with my own panic. I called a safety stop before the next mechanism released. The royal timer kept running while we reset the damaged frame. Garo expected me to issue a cleaner sequence of commands. Instead, I gave each person 1 objective, 1 hazard, and 1 time. Ryan would keep the passage open for 30 seconds despite shifting stone. Saya would maintain 1 safe return loop through the smoke. Charlotte would protect the clinic cache and identify the water hazard. Garo would turn the live beast away from every occupied lane. Their methods belonged to them. The second bell rang before my heartbeat had slowed. Rin ran toward the cracked gallery rather than the jammed gate. She planted 2 standardized brace shoes beneath the moving lintel. Her crew drove a maker spine wedge into each shoe on the first strike. The force traveled down the marked ribs instead of through the crowded opening. Amber lines gathered around her forearms and flared burnt orange. SKL ACQ fired. Load brace. Stone right rank, C to B. She held the gallery long enough for the last cart to pass, then released it in stages. Saya climbed the signal tower as smoke swallowed the floor beneath her. She struck 3 plates and listened to the echoes return from hidden walls. Silver grids unfolded across her moon-dark wings. 1 route echoed clean while every apparent shortcut ended in smoke. SKIL awkward, EQCRID. Pagefinder rank, D2B. She sent 2 bell notes, and the evacuation crew changed direction without seeing her. Charlotte dipped 3 test strips into the colored sluice. The blue dye was harmless, but a mana irritant shimmered beneath it. She moved the medicine cache uphill and drew a green boundary around the only safe draw point. SKILE ACQ wired. Safe boundary. Life Warden rank CTB. The clinic assistants crossed inside her marked zone while contaminated spray struck the outer cloth. The rock elk burst through its gate with stone antlers lowered. Garo did not brace in front of it. He slapped 1 vibration plate. retreated behind a breakaway screen, and opened an angled lane. The elk followed the rhythm, broke the empty screen, and turned between two padded barriers. Skilacqu ired, turnline guard. Guardian rank C2B. Gato closed the lane behind it without laying a weapon against its hide. The arena changed inside my sight. Smoke became moving pressure. People became flow through constrained openings. Every falling load became a line seeking ground. The separate pictures merged into one living map. Skills acquired flawline. Skills acquired foundation link. A construct swung a stone hammer into a damaged pier, while 6 people crossed the next platform. The pier could not carry that transient force alone. I marked 3 sacrificial supports through Mogu, and asked Rin for permission to link their load. She struck the approval plate once. The impact spread through all 3 frames and cracked only the replaceable wedges. Skilacqu ired, load share. Command load, 100% to 37%. The next construct group attacked from 3 levels at once. I sent a single pulse for objective, hazard, and time. Saya marked the clear stair. Garo turned the lower attacker into an empty barrier. Rin dropped a breakaway ramp after the crew crossed. Charlotte moved 1 injured observer inside her safe line. Each protected the next person's task without waiting for a second command. The guild witnesses stopped writing long enough to watch. Then, the quarry warden woke. Its iron feet locked into the royal seal. 1 stone arm swept a practice wall apart. The golem was stronger than our whole team, and anchored where no ordinary shove could move it. Vela reminded us that destroying royal property would also count as failure. Garo circled left and struck a decoy plate. The warden turned its chest without moving its iron shoes. Saya mapped the delay between its control seal and its next step. Rin identified 4 sacrificial piers around an old repair trench. Charlotte cleared everyone from the dust lane and protected the only clean exit. Mogu traced a release void beneath the maintenance cradle. I saw a solution that looked like retreat from every individual angle. Saya called the patrol interval. Garo shifted the golem's momentum with 2 turnline screens. Ren accepted the load pulse and transferred its next strike into the sacrificial piers. The piers folded in the order she had marked. The warden lunged toward the false opening. Mogu opened the release void beneath its leading foot. The anchored seal dropped with it. The golem fell backward into its own maintenance cradle. Rin's braces caught the shoulders before its head struck stone. The control light faded with the warden entirely intact. For a moment, the only sound was ash settling on the arena floor. The combat value 0 mole sat above a trapped quarry boss and cleaned 1 claw. 1 guild worker began laughing for a reason the royal guards did not share. Vela raised her hand before the crowd could claim the result. The dropped block from our first failure had cracked a test frame. She would not certify a system that hid damage behind victory. Taro rolled the repair cart forward without looking at me. The apprentice selected the matching shoes and wedges from the signed drawers. Rin unloaded the frame and marked the fracture ends. Saya entered the failure into the incident log with its actual cause. The assigned node maintainer removed the broken section and signed the closeout. 17 minutes after the flag, the repaired frame stood under a fresh load. Vela added a second weight. The standardized braces held. Press res. Phase cleared. KI, level 3 to 8. RIN, Stonewright C to B. Saya, Page Finder D to B. Charlotte, Life Warden C to B. Garo, Guardian C to B. Taro registered the first recurring inspection calendar beside the tool ledger. Rin accepted ownership of structural load tests. Saya accepted ownership of incident records. Each maintainer signed responsibility for repair closeout on their own node. Foundation node, Proven Works. Maintain nodes, 9 of 9. Retained foundation charge, 360 of 360. The rank crystal above Hollowmere's banner turned green-gold. Foundation potential, B. The result remained visible for 1 breath. Rigid violet charcoal geometry shot from the crystal toward Vela's crown seal. The green-gold light drained away as if pulled through a knife-cut channel. Legal settlement rank, F. The guild witnesses had seen both results. So had every resident standing behind the rope. Mogu's ochre body lengthened beside my boot. His fur deepened to slate brown. Bronze ridges formed across shoulders now as broad as a badger's. Teal gold node glyphs rotated beneath all 4 paws. Mo-Ju, Bastion Mole. Private rank A network radius, 3 kilometers. Civic learning, 2.77 times. Public combat value, 0. Mogu looked from his new armored shoulders to the final card and kicked dust over it. The crowd did not erupt into one voice. Guild workers surrounded Rin to ask for the brace dimensions. 2 route scouts copied Saya's 3-note smoke signal on their own plates. Charlotte made the witnesses wash irritant dye from their boots before entering breath hall. Garo stared at the intact warden in its cradle and rubbed one scarred jaw. A wall can hit harder than a fist when the ground chooses the angle. Vela waited until the practical questions had become impossible to dismiss. Then she offered us a royal contract at Atlas Pass. The pass bridge needed repair before the Red Moon migration. The route needed protected evacuation lanes and a working waystone beacon. Success would grant trail rations, provisional land recognition, and one waystone fragment. Failure would place Hollowmere directly beneath the northern herd route. Sora read every clause aloud at the Ring of Stones. Orin identified 2 transfer clauses and forced Vela to strike them. Rin co-signed for the work crews. Orin co-signed for the freehold claim. 31 household stones entered the circle, and 27 remained after debate. The approved contract felt less like permission than a trap we had chosen to inspect. Mogu spread his new 3-kilometer map under the road north. The contract said the Ashhorn herd would pass beyond Hollowmere's eastern ridge. Every royal resonance line on Mogu's map pointed south into our basin. Atlas Pass opened above Hollowmere like a stoned throat between 2 red ridges. The washed-out bridge crossed its narrowest point over a basin filled with loose shale. 3 thin royal towers stood along the southern rim with copper veins turning in clear air. The contract supervisor called them weather spires before anyone had asked. Our stated job had 3 parts. We would restore the bridge, protect an evacuation lane, and wake the old Waystone beacon. The Ashhorn herd was not marked for extermination. It was supposed to migrate north of us on night 11 and continue toward the salt flats. Burrow walked us across the basin before a single hammer rose. He found old crescent hoof marks beneath the washed gravel and placed my boot inside one. An Ashhorn stood taller than a cart, with a slate elk bison body and forward ash-white horns. Thousands moved together during the red moon. They ran downhill toward strong rhythmic vibration. They turned poorly once their mass gathered speed. They avoided loose shale because it shifted beneath their split hooves. Attacking the herd from either side made the animals compress toward the center. So your wall becomes their anvil, Burrow said. He had registered children through 2 previous migration alarms before the militia took him. His knowledge came from evacuation records, not a heroic hunter's legend. I erased the straight barrier from my slate. Our defense would need to make the safe route feel easier than Hollowmere. The bridge deck and stone abutments had survived the spring flood. Its brace fittings had washed into the ravine. Under the old system, Taro would have forged every shoe against a different scar in the stone. Instead, one signed apprentice opened 3 maker's spine crates, standard plates seated against royal sockets. Taro had serviced years earlier. Matching wedges tightened the first brace without recutting its face. Rin's crews worked from both ends because every measurement shared the common datum. Mogu mapped hidden voids beneath the abutment while remaining inside his 3-kilometer limit. Saya rejected one anchor point where an old drain had hollowed the foundation. We shifted the brace shoe and documented the change before covering it. By afternoon, the last crossframe carried load across both ribs. Rin refused to open the crossing because the bridge looked finished. Crews filled stone carts to the contract maximum and rolled them onto the center span. The deck settled by 2 marked lines, exactly inside its permitted range. A second cart joined it. The braces held while Saya timed a full crossing batch between signal plates. Verified test. Load, 7.5 tons. Safe crossing batch, 24 people. Repair time saved, 31 hours. Evacuation route open. Contract trail ration, plus 42 days. Hollowmere food reserve, 8.4 to 12.4 days. The food target for my first night in Hollowmere finally glowed on Sora's slate. 12.4 days would outlast the red moon, even if every road closed. It existed because the pantry had stopped waste. The crown had returned stolen grain, and this contract paid real rations. No single miracle had filled the number. A chain of proved systems had. The old Waystone beacon stood beyond the bridge under a cracked ivory hood. Its center held a pale jade recess shaped like Sora's recovered survey plate. Orin passed me Hollowmere's half while Vela observed through her lens. I placed it beside the fragment released under our contract. The broken edges locked with a clear mineral note. 7 radial grooves shone around the joined slate. For 3 breaths, symbols appeared above it. They were not royal script. They were coordinate notation I remembered from Earth, with latitude, longitude, and 1 incomplete elevation string. My throat closed around the first number. A clean route home was not open, but somebody in this world had once mapped my world precisely enough to record it. The pale jade light extended toward Hollowmere through the old royal beacon network. Then rigid violet geometry snapped around the coordinates. Crown lock. ACTIV. Waist and anchors, 1 of 7. The image vanished before I could copy the final digits. Mogu scratched the first 2 numbers into dust from memory. His own ground sense ended 3 kilometers from his paws. The signal between the pass and Hollowmere was Waystone telemetry, not a sudden limitless tunnel map. That distinction mattered the moment horns sounded from the North Road. Clayan crossed the repaired bridge at the head of our summoned class. His cobalt and gold armor reflected cyan arcs from the Stormane lion beside him. The enormous lion's sun-gold paws made our new braces hum. Its white mane carried more lightning than it had in the royal hall. Akino followed in her wine magenta coat with rose-pink hair tied above one shoulder. The other students' beasts had gained visible muscle, armor, or elemental aura. Their handlers still crowded the same lane whenever an instructor raised one flag. The crown had increased their output faster than their coordination. Clean announced a synchronized charge demonstration across the bridge. Stormmane lowered its shoulders willingly beside him. Their bond remained real even when their judgment was dangerous. Mogu struck the deck once before they moved. A cyan reflection shivered along a buried resonance line beneath the center span. Stormmane saw it too and paused with one paw lifted. Cleon touched the lion's mane and studied the harmless-looking seam. The bridge just held 7.5 tons. Weight is not the warning, I said. I marked the line with teal chalk from abutment to ridge. Your combined force will travel through the ground until something else receives it. Cleon called the seam insignificant, but he shortened the demonstration to one charge. The blast crossed cleanly and drew cheers from the instructors. Dust fell from the nearest royal spire after the applause ended. Saya had already climbed the southern ridge. She struck one lure tower with the padded end of her survey staff. The foundation answered in the same slow rhythm Garo had demonstrated with an ashhorn hoof pattern. The second spire repeated it half a breath later. The third completed a pulse aimed down the basin. These were not measuring weather. They were broadcasting the exact downhill cadence that attracted the herd. Saya mapped their alignment on the contract sheet. All three pointed south toward Hollowmere rather than north toward the approved migration route. Vela reached us before Saya could take a resonance rubbing from the final base. She claimed the old towers recorded pressure changes ahead of red ash. Mogu dug one stolen crown nail from his fur and placed it beside the nearest mounting plate. The crown root marks matched. Vela's expression did not change. Her thumb tightened against the cracked rim of her lens. That night, Waystone telemetry showed a royal crew removing the western tower. Vela had ordered it move before we could document all three in place. The removal destroyed one measurement and confirmed that someone feared it. Saya's first two rubbings entered Orin's duplicate archive before dawn. We used Garo's herd rules to turn the basin itself into a defense plan. Rin placed curved rubble berms that would bend a running line instead of stopping it. Taro's crews assembled angled gabion frames with replaceable maker's spine pins. Breakaway screens offered loud empty targets and collapsed away from occupied routes. Saya marked scree lanes where loose shale would slow a turn without trapping an animal. Garo positioned vibration plates beyond each curve to draw the herd toward open ground. Counterweighted gates could release one lane while closing another from behind stone cover. Mogu traced each component in teal gold and showed where their loads crossed. We called the full system tide break. It was not a wall strong enough to defeat a migration. It was a set of choices the herd could survive. We tested those choices with loaded sledges before trusting them to living animals. Garo tied 3 sledges into a rough herd front and released them down the compacted lane. The first straight berm took the impact squarely and threw one sledge toward an occupied scaffold. Rin stopped the test and painted that design red before anyone praised its strength. We curved the next berm, loosened the outer shale, and moved the decoy plate beyond the turn. All 3 sledges followed the bend and separated harmlessly across the quarry floor. Saya timed the gate from a blind signal station where she could not see my hands. Her lantern code reached Taro's gate crew through 2 mirrors and 1 bell relay. The counterweight lifted 6 heartbeats before the sledges arrived. That margin became our minimum instead of a reason to make the next test faster. Sora tracked every filled gabion against the labor meals they consumed. Serving the contract had drawn 36 workers away from Hollowmere's remaining repairs. The trail rations covered their food, but not the fatigue waiting behind their eyes. Charlotte ended each shift at the first loss of grip strength, regardless of my completion chart. Our tidebreak estimate reached 58% before the last evening bell. Rin and I sat on the repaired parapet while Mogu inspected the braces below us. The bridge carried distant hammer blows as soft, regular tremors beneath our boots. Your first wall would have killed the things it claimed to stop, Rin said. That is why I keep professionals nearby. You keep professionals nearby because we refuse to leave. Her copper eyes stayed on the lure towers rather than on me. I passed her the chalk, and she corrected the next gate angle across my sleeve. The mark remained there when we stood for the Royal Class's evening drill. The Royal Class trained above us while we built below. Akano's Royal Chorus tightened their timing whenever students gave genuine support to Cleon's declared sequence. The skill worked, and their formation improved for several clean passes. Then a crown instructor prompted a rehearsed cheer before anyone had inspected the route. The copied voices arrived half a beat apart. 2 beasts broke cadence and nearly struck the same post. Akino stopped the chorus before the collision. She glanced toward my warning line, but she did not cross the bridge to speak with me. On the evening clock, Night 11 sat 3 nights away. Farron's new order arrived through the ridge crystal in his own cold voice. The students would drink acceleration drafts and continue resonance training until accreditation. Cleon and Stormmane approached a blue stone basin together. The lion sniffed the liquid, then drank only after Cleon tasted it first. Cyan lightning thickened along its white mane. Cleon's rank card rose in a burst bright enough to paint the whole bridge blue. The class shouted his name. Under their feet, the resonance line spiked beyond Mogu's safe mark. Far below us, all 3 lure spire traces answered with the rhythm of running hooves. The ridge feed Vela recovered later showed me what happened after I returned to Hollowmere. Cleon and Stormmane remained at Atlas Pass under the Crown's accelerated schedule. The second draft pushed cyan light through every white strand of the lion's mane. Cleon's cobalt gauntlet sparked when he touched the animal's shoulder. Their willing bond carried more force because neither hesitated before a charge. That made the danger cleaner, not smaller. The first resonant charge split a practice boulder without slowing either of them. The impact also shook dust from the repaired bridge and all 3 lower spire foundations. Storm main output, plus 84%. Ground resonance, safe limit times 26. Clean read the first line and raised his fist at the class. The royal instructor folded the second line out of public view. A cracked training platform shifted beneath 6 students during the next drill. Akano called for a real endorsement before using Royal Chorus. The students chose Klein's retreat sequence because he could clear the broken span first. Their genuine support gathered around her in wine magenta light. The whole group withdrew in one tight cadence before the platform collapsed. Her skill prevented injuries. Then the instructor ordered the class to repeat the maneuver for a recording. Attendance prompted applause from behind a painted screen. The performed voices entered Royal Chorus with tiny phase errors. One handler stepped early and another beast struck the rail. Akino cut the false chorus before anyone fell. She told the instructor that scripted support could not replace informed endorsement. The ridge crystal opened above them with Varen's ivory and gold seal. He ordered the next dose doubled. The instructor mentioned the broken platform and Mogu's resonance warning. Varen forbade evacuation from the ridge. The class had to reach its Day 12 accreditation threshold, whatever the ground recorded. While the crown chased output, we built routes for people who could not outrun it. Many ways home began with vibration plates beneath sleeping terraces. One pattern meant falling stone. Another meant ash. A rolling pulse meant the migration route had shifted. Saya paired every plate with bell and lantern codes, so no single sense carried the warning. Household muster boards listed adults, minors, dependents, mobility needs, and assigned route marshals. Sora placed water, damp wool, lantern oil, and measured food in redundant caches. Rin widened old galleries only after load crews proved their ribs. Charlotte set a walking pace based on elders, children, and residents with injuries. No household was required to use Mogu's magical link to receive an alarm or a place in Breath Hall. The first full drill began beneath a clear evening sky. Saya rang the migration code from the North Ridge. Household marshals overturned their marked boards as each group departed. The pantry terrace took the eastern stair exactly as my route plan required. An elder with a cane reached the third switchback and stopped. The grade was too steep to climb at Charlotte's safe pace. A cart carrying 2 injured residents could not turn around him. On the lower terrace, workers heard the vibration plate, but could not see the lantern behind the new pantry roof. 3 families followed the wrong bell into a gallery narrowed by stored gabions. My diagram showed clean arrows. Real bodies crowded, rested, carried children, missed signals, and chose familiar doors. The last household reached its muster point after 19 minutes. 2 residents had been counted twice. One child waited beside the wrong cache with a marshal who refused to leave her alone. The system had passed every paper condition and failed the people inside it. I started explaining why the eastern route had been mathematically faster. Charlotte took the chalk from my hand before I finished. She set the maximum grade and rest interval. Saya moved the hidden lantern onto a mast visible from both terraces. Rin widened 2 turns and removed one beautifully measured but unnecessary rail. Sora split the largest cache into 3 smaller stations along the slower routes. Household marshals changed the boards so names traveled with people instead of staying at the starting point. Garo assigned paired sweepers who checked empty alcoves without delaying the main line. The corrections came from everyone who had been slowed, missed, or miscounted. We ran the second drill after dark. Lantern codes carried over the roofs. The cane route climbed in 2 gentle loops with benches between them. The clinic cart passed both widened turns without lifting a wheel. Children followed colored stones that could be seen below the smoke line. Saya received the final household marker at the ring. Muster time, 19 minutes to 7 minutes 40 seconds. Residents accounted for, 92 of 92. Foundation node, many ways home. The common answered with a green-gold ring under every route marker. Nobody celebrated the first drill as a necessary failure. We logged who had carried its risk and finished the corrections they requested. Orin placed the failed map beside the Breath Hall doorway template in our growing archive of useful embarrassment. The children named the gentler route, Kai's, definitely. A shortcut. I lost another vote to Mogu's Pebble. The route marshals ran smaller household checks through the next afternoon. One vibration plate failed beneath a fixed sleeping mat, so Taro moved its striker into the wall. A deaf resident chose the lantern code and a hand pulse cord instead of the bell. 2 night workers requested a separate muster token because their household board began across the quarry. Saya added it without forcing either person into the magical signal link. Sora sealed each route cache with a breakable clay count rather than a lock. Anyone could reach emergency supplies, and the broken seal would tell her what needed replacing. Charlotte marked damp wool bundles by touch for smoke, dark rooms. Garo made every sweeper lead 1 drill without him standing behind them. By dusk, the warning system belonged to households instead of a command post. That independence gave me enough time to return through the tide break plans once more. 71% meant the main curve existed, But 2 turn gates still lacked full fittings. The western screen had not survived its loaded sledge test. One scree lane ended too close to a clinic path. Rin moved the clinic path while Taro's apprentices remade the failed screen pins. Sora calculated that we could finish the safe route before night 11 without cutting rest. The schedule depended on the crown honoring the migration clock printed in its own contract. Vela arrived at the ring during that calculation and refused tea. Her cracked lens showed fresh blue filings around the remaining lure spire sockets. Somebody had prepared the towers for a stronger resonance load. She would not accuse Varen without an order bearing his seal. She did warn us that royal accreditation drills now continued through the night. Orin asked whether Hollowmere had been included in the emergency transmission list. Vela checked twice and found our Waystone address categorized as an inactive refugee relay. Saya corrected the address locally, but only the Crown could authorize a ridge alarm. We created our own listening watch instead. 2 adults monitored Waystone telemetry while another pair kept hands on the north vibration plate. No one linked to Mogu unless they wanted the extra ground pulse. The watchers rotated every hour so fear could not disguise fatigue as useful vigilance. I took the 3rd shift with Rin and the outline of Atlas Ridge against the stars. She asked whether the Earth coordinates had changed what I would choose after the review. I told her one fragment was evidence, not a door. She said engineers often called a promise evidence when they wanted permission to leave. Before I found an answer, the north plate moved beneath both our hands. Late on day 9, every route plate trembled without a signal from Saya. Waystone telemetry flashed open above the ring. The live ridge feed showed Clion standing beside the central lure spire. The instructor had ordered a final synchronized demonstration for the accreditation record. Clion knew the spire coupled into the migration caverns. Stormay knew the ground line too, and its paws shifted away from the cracked seam. Clion placed a hand against the lion's cheek and pointed toward the protected training lane. He wanted to prove their overdrive could dominate the terrain that had made them hesitate. The lion chose to lower its shoulder beside him. Neither was forced. That made the choice theirs. Akano warned that the class had not endorsed another full output sequence. The instructor called her caution a loss of confidence. Clion and Stormane charged together. Cyan lightning entered the lure spire instead of breaking across the air. Their synchronized roar traveled down the royal resonance line like a hammer inside stone. The basin beneath Atlas Pass answered. One deep impact rolled under Hollowmere. Then another came from farther north. Thousands of hooves struck migration caverns that should have remained quiet for 33 more hours. Red ash rose behind the ridge before the blue lightning faded. The class's cheers became scattered shouts. Varen appeared through the ridge crystal while instructors prepared to withdraw. He ordered the students to hold position for battle exposure. He did not order a warning sent to Hollowmere. Vela's recovered archive later showed the warning field left blank. Mogu slammed both front paws into the ring, his 3-kilometer ground map lit from the north road to the quarry edge. Waystone telemetry extended the red trace back to Atlas Pass. The moving front was too broad for a patrol and too fast for the scheduled migration. Ashhorn Ash Revival. 6 hours. Tide break completion. 71%. World route signature, approaching. The 6-hour clock put the herd at Hollowmere around dawn on day 10. It would arrive approximately 33 hours before the normal night 11 crossing. Ren looked toward the incomplete western turngate. Garrow looked toward the straight wall we had wisely never built. Charlotte looked toward Breath Hall, already stocked for 96 bodies. I looked at every one of the 92 names on the muster board. A wall could not be finished in 6 hours. A route could. I ordered every crew to complete the route, not the wall. The first Ashhorn scouts reached the quarry road while Taro was still fitting the western gate. Red ash turned dawn into a copper bruise above Atlas Ridge. 3 slate animals appeared through it with crescent horns low and dust burning through their coats. They followed the road's downhill rhythm until Garo struck a decoy plate beyond the empty quarry floor. The lead scout turned toward the deeper beat. Its companions followed, hooves skidding across the first scree lane. Our unfinished route had worked on 3 animals. The ground behind them sounded like an approaching city. Before those scouts appeared, 6 hours had become 4, while the last gate pieces cooled at Maker's spine. Taro's apprentices carried them in padded racks so one dropped pin could not stop an entire lane. Rin divided the incomplete work into must-hold, may-break, and never-load components. Crews abandoned the decorative retaining face and moved every basket into the critical outer curve. The choice made Tidebreak look unfinished because it was honest about what mattered. Garo walked each vibration team through its retreat route before letting anyone touch a decoy plate. Nobody would stand between a sounding target and the herd. Saya shortened the signal code until every instruction fit inside 3 flashes or 3 bell strikes. Long explanations would disappear in ash and hoof thunder. Sora issued each crew 1 sealed ration and enough water for a full shift. She also placed relief teams behind them, because adrenaline did not repeal exhaustion. Charlotte checked masks along the north rim and rejected 3 that fitted fur but not moving jaws. The residents fixed the straps with spare tool library buckles. Mogu ranged across his 20 pabs, touching gates without trying to carry their whole load. Whenever his glyphs dimmed, one assigned maintainer reported the condition from that node. He did not need to become 7 exhausted moles at once. At Breath Hall, The household marshals performed the corrected route without a rehearsal pause. 21 minors entered with named adults or assigned escorts. Every declining adult still received the same warning, route, shelter place, and ration as linked residents. The network was faster because its human systems did not depend on magical obedience. Many ways home. Active. Resident roster. 92 of 92 tracked. I stood beside the common datum post with no central command platform. My map showed owners already positioned at every function. Rin touched 2 fingers to my sleeve before taking the western gate. The chalk angle she had drawn there at Atlas Pass was still visible beneath the ash. Saya's ridge mirrors flashed the distance through the ash. Herd front, 3.2 kilometers. East route closed, quarry bypass, open. I could not see the herd from the common. I could see its movement through bell codes, mirror light, and Mogu's teal gold map. Every gate and route on that map used the same common datum. Every crew read distance from the same marked posts. When the outer hinge twisted, an apprentice selected its replacement before the broken piece reached Taro's forge. The new pin fitted on the first attempt. We did not gain time through speed. We gained it by refusing to solve the same measurement twice. Many ways home sounded across all 4 terraces. Household boards turned as families entered their assigned routes. The gentler loop carried elders, children, and carts without blocking the quarry stair. Lantern masts remained visible as the ash thickened. Paired sweepers knocked 3 times and called names outside every private alcove. They did not wait for an answer from rooms already marked empty. The last clinic cart entered Breath Hall before the first major wave crossed the north rim. Charlotte stood inside the widened threshold with 1 green boundary painted around triage. Wet wool baffles darkened at both protected intakes. The fire-warmed exhaust drew ash upward without pulling it across the patients. Gas-lichened tiles stayed within their safe color. Clean boundary channels carried fouled runoff away from the clinic path. The sealed spring supplied covered water through a line protected from falling dust. Charlotte assigned assistants to every station and did not ask me what to do next. Sora opened the route caches by count. She sent measured water and damp wool to the north gate before any district could hoard it. The living pantry became 3 smaller supply points along the evacuation loops. Her ledger left enough reserve inside Breath Hall for every resident and every injured student we might receive. One worker reached for the last filter bundle at the West cache. Sora showed him the clinic allocation and handed him the correct smaller packet. Numbers prevented panic from choosing favorites. The second herd report arrived as a broken mirror flash. Royal students were attacking the migration flank north of the pass. Waystone telemetry opened long enough to show elemental blasts striking the outer animals. Fire and ice scatter individual ash horns. The mass behind them compressed away from those attacks. The entire front shifted toward Hollowmere's inhabited terraces. Clion and Stormane drove through the center in a sheath of cyan lightning. Their charge cleared a spectacular empty lane for 3 seconds. Then animals on both sides filled it and moved south faster. The herd followed Crown Resonance, Stormane's ground-coupled power, and the downhill basin beneath us. Killing the first row would only give the next 1,000 bodies something to climb over. I sent 1 foundation pulse through Mogu. Objective: move the front into the abandoned quarry. Hazard: no flank attacks. Time: before the western gate lost its approach angle. Saya changed the ridge signals without waiting for another instruction. Garo moved his vibration teams behind the curved berms. Ren released the first counterweight and checked the load through her boots. Taro's crews carried spare pins toward the gate most likely to jam. The system moved while I watched only its shared map. The first full ashhorn wave struck the outer turn. Hundreds of slatebacks emerged through red dust as one uneven wall. Garo stood in the empty lane with no raised sword. He struck a deep rhythm on the far decoy plate. Forward horn shifted toward him. He retreated behind a breakaway screen before the leaders reached it. The screen snapped loudly and collapsed away from his path. The herd followed that impact into the curve. Loose shale slid beneath their hooves. Their speed fell just enough for the rear animals to follow the safer inside line. Rin's angled gabions accepted the pressure without becoming a stray barrier. The wave bent into the abandoned quarry floor. Direct impacts. On Hollowmere, 64% predicted to 21%. Tidebreak node, partial. Garo reached the protected ledge and stared at hundreds of animals running where homes were not. His mouth opened around a laugh that sounded almost angry. The partial turn bought 17 minutes before the main pressure shifted west. That was exactly the repair time Maker's spine had proved at an ordinary gate. 3 apprentices crawled behind the protected gabion line with the replacement hinge set. They removed the bent leaf while the counterweight hung on Rin's temporary brace. The pin seated on the first attempt despite ash coating every exposed surface. Taro checked the lead apprentice's stamp, then let her call the load test herself. The gate cycled once before the next wave reached it. 17 measured minutes had become 17 minutes of survival. At the same time, Saya lost her north mirror to a thrown stone. She changed the route map through bell plates without asking me for a new plan. 2 short notes closed the damaged observation post. 3 rolling notes moved its watchers into a tunnel with a clean side opening. The household signal chain repeated her update across the terraces. Inside Breath Hall, 1 intake baffle reached its ash limit. Charlotte's trained assistants closed that damper, changed the wool, and increased the flue fire. The second independent intake carried the whole refuge during the replacement. Airflow dropped but remained inside the emergency number posted after the block shaft test. Charlotte treated a child's panic without changing the evacuation count to an injury statistic. At the lower cache, a water cask cracked under a stray hoof vibration. Sora redirected its allocation from 2 smaller stations and recorded the loss in real time. The pantry reserve remained above the final emergency minimum. Every ordinary test we had performed returned as a decision someone else could make. That was the moment I understood Hollowmere was not waiting for me to save it. Foundation system owners, operating without central command. Then cyan lightning struck the northern screen. Cleon and Stormain landed between the second wave and our turn lane. Red dust rolled away from the lion's enormous paws. "You are hurting an A-rank migration with fences," Cleon shouted through the waystone relay. "We are giving it somewhere else to go." He pointed toward the crushed scouts behind him. "Then give me the front." Stormain lowered its shoulders beside him with complete trust. They launched a willing resonant charge directly into the approaching line. Cyan force scattered the leaders without killing them. The visible victory lasted until that force entered the quarry floor. 1 breakaway screen exploded backward instead of folding along its pins. The western counterweight jumped from its groove. The final turn gate stopped halfway open. The scattered ashhorns regrouped around the obstruction and began climbing toward the sleeping terraces. Single target success had worsened the system-scale danger exactly where everyone could see it. Cleon raised another charge. Mogu opened a teal-gold grounding map beneath Stormain's paws. 1 safe lane crossed spare conductor plates, followed the load path braces, and ended at the jammed gate winch. Rin and Taro connected the plates while ashhorn horns struck the outer gabions. I sent the route through waystone telemetry. Discharge here at 1/3 cadence when Saya marks the opening. Cleon stared at the narrow lane. "You want an S-rank beast to become your gate handle. I want your force to reach the one place that needs it." He refused and turned toward the collapsing direct lane. Stormain did not follow at once. The lion watched the packed animals rebound from the broken screen. It looked down at Mogu's path, then touched one white maned shoulder to the first conductor plate. Mogu was smaller than one of its paws. He did not bow, command, or claim the lion. He tapped the safe cadence into the ground. Stormain answered with 1 controlled spark. The jammed winch moved a finger's width. Cleon saw his direct lane vanish beneath the next wave. He placed his gauntlet against Stormain's shoulder and chose the mapped route with it. Saya's mirror flashed once. The pair discharged through the marked grid. Cyan lightning crossed every spare plate without leaping into occupied stone. Rin's load brace distributed the transient force through 3 sacrificial supports. The western counterweight lifted. The gate opened without breaking its foundation. Garo struck the far decoy. The blocked herd front poured through the new lane and turned away from Hollowmere. Clean's spectacular power had mattered. It had mattered because he accepted one defined role among many. Akeno appeared on the ridge relay with ash across her magenta coat. She called the maneuver the royal team's recovery. Sora answered, before resentment could become another useless argument. She read the signed work ledger over the same channel. Rin's gate crew had built the frame. Taro's apprentices had made the interchangeable fittings. Saya had marked the opening. Garo's teams had drawn the herd. Cleon and Stormain had supplied the grounding discharge. The record erased neither their useful choice nor everyone else's authorship. Akeno's expression tightened, but she did not cut the transmission. The herd map changed again beneath Mogu. A larger pulse moved behind the ashhorn front. It was slower than the migration and deep enough to touch every foundation node at once. Red ash opened around a shell as broad as the royal summoning hall. An atlas tortoise entered the basin on pillars of dark, patient legs. Layers of moss and ochre rootstone covered its back. Harmless living roots shifted across the shell with each step. Its calm black eyes remained on the ancestral route ahead. The lure spires had driven the ashhorns across the same nesting path. If the herd compressed around the tortoise, it would scatter through every remaining exit. We did not need to rescue a helpless sacred creature. We needed to restore the route all these animals had used before the crown bent it. Saya climbed the signal ridge through falling ash. Her echo grid marked one opening between the main herd and the slower shell. Garo moved 2 decoy teams into staggered positions beyond the quarry. Rin held the final gate against an uneven load that made every brace sing. Charlotte received 3 injured students at Breath Hall without abandoning the residents already inside. One carried a crushed ankle. Another coughed red ash through a torn filter. The third had mana burns from standing inside Stormain's uncontrolled ground arc. Charlotte placed all 3 within safe boundary and assigned treatment by severity, not uniform. Mogu connected the open route from North Ridge to Salt Flat exit. His 20 A-rank paths glowed across the quarry in teal and gold. I used Flowline to read the spacing between herd pulses. The lead mass struck Garo's first rhythm and turned. The second decoy sounded before the rear could close the gap. Saya flashed the final opening. Rin released the gate. The curved gabions took the first shoulder impacts and shed their outer baskets as designed. Lou's scree widened the turn. The main herd entered the quarry, crossed below the terraces, and climbed toward the open salt flats. One late ashhorn stumbled beside the Atlas tortoise. The tortoise changed nothing about its gait. The animal regained its footing in the calm space beside that enormous leg. The last wave passed Hollowmere without touching the sleeping overhang. Red dust continued moving after the hooves became distant. Saya counted every route signal back to the ring. Charlotte reported from Breath Hall. Sora closed the final cash ledger. Rin checked the gate pins before checking the card above us. Residents accounted for 92 of 92. Fatalities, 0 injuries, 1. Direct herd deflection, 87%. Foundation note, tie to break. Civic learning, 348 times. Settlement defense, D2A. No one shouted at the result. The silence held students, guild witnesses, royal guards, and quarry residents beneath the same red sky. Then people began checking one another. Household marshals matched names to faces. Taro's crews replaced the sacrificed wedges. Charlotte's assistants carried clean water to the ridge. Garo walked the empty turn lane and collected each unbroken decoy plate. The rescue stood as work before it became a story. The Atlas tortoise continued along its own route. It did not bow to Mogu. It did not speak my name or place a gift at my feet. Its building-sized shell simply crossed the basin we had reopened. Each step sent a broad, distributed load through the repaired bridge, the quarry ribs, and every maintained node. Common datum posts answered first. Load path braces carried the pulse into the western shelf. Breath Hall's Burrow passed it into the spring chamber. Maker's spine gates transferred it across the quarry floor. Tiebreak sent the final vibration through the mercy marker. For the first time, all 11 physical works carried one natural load together. Mogu froze at the center of the common. His teal-gold surface map folded downward through layers none of us had seen. White jade bands appeared beneath the ochre quarry stone. They did not resemble Crown Root's rigid violet geometry. They curved like geological strata shaped around water, roots, pressure, and old foundations. 12 bands had been cut around the camp and left dormant. The tortoise's distributed load made every severed end answer at once. World Root S Stratum, detected. Dormant Stratum bands, 12 of 12. Physical works. Tested, 11 of 11. Civic load test, passed. Mogu projected the result across the quarry wall. Rin followed one severed band to the mercy marker and drove a thin test pin beside it. Taro compared the cut with an old royal conduit socket from his gauge archive. Saya traced its direction through waystone telemetry toward the capital. The crown had not discovered Hollowmere's potential today. Somebody had cut this civic network long before the refugee camp received its F-card. Mogu's map reshaped the severed bands into an actionable pattern. 12 stones formed a ring around a pale jade center. 11 had to come from proved physical works. The 12th required a resident covenant rather than another wall. Reclaimed crown conduit would align the severed channels. An independent audit would verify every stone under load. The design named the whole resident-built assembly an Atlas keystone. Nothing had hatched from the tortoise's shell. Nothing needed to be absorbed or swallowed by Mogu. Hollowmere would have to make the keystone from its own maintained proof. Vela stood beside the fading projection with red ash caught in her ash-blonde hair. Her cracked lens had recorded a combat value 0 beast, redirecting an A-rank migration. It had also recorded a severed sovereign stratum beneath Crown land. She transmitted both results before asking whether the king wished to comment. The 2 guild witnesses added their signatures to the same unedited waystone packet. One royal guard tried to classify Tidebreak as a temporary battlefield enchantment. Rin placed a mud-coated replacement pin in his hand and named the apprentice who had made it. Saya added the household drill records, with the failed 19-minute result still visible beside the correction. Charlotte certified that Breath Hall had protected linked and unlinked residents under identical rules. Sora attached the ration ledger showing exactly what the rescue had consumed. The event could not be reduced to my skill or Mogu's hidden rank. Its proof existed in weights, routes, maintenance marks, and 92 living witnesses. Varen's reply arrived less than a minute later. The Day 12 freehold review would be moved forward. Hollowmere had until then to prove its claim under royal inspection. The crown intended to review us before we could finish the keystone. One last rank card opened above the mercy marker in front of every witness. Hollowmere, Foundation Potential, A. Green gold light climbed toward the white jade stratum. Rigid violet charcoal geometry closed around it. 71 parts of every 100 turned toward the capital. Growth diverted, 71%. Destination, Crown Route. Legal settlement rank, FA. The red moon passed behind the ash. The herd disappeared toward the salt flats. Beneath us, every severed world route band pointed toward the crown's violet charcoal conduit. The red moon left Hollowmere under a sky the color of cooling iron. Ash drifted beyond the clean boundary, but our spring ran clear beneath its stone cover. The first sound after the last ashhorn vanished was not cheering. It was Sora calling 92 names from a soot-stained ledger. Every answer struck me harder than the herd had. 92 residents had entered the night, and 92 still answered at dawn. Charlotte stabilized the one serious injury inside Breath Hall while her assistants ran the clinic without waiting for me. Garo walked the lowest quarry floor and marked each breakaway screen that needed replacing. Taro's apprentices carried standardized hinges toward the gate Stormmane had opened. Rhine stood beneath the bent tidebrake arm with a plumb cord between two claws. It moved 4 fingers, she said. I looked at the intact sleeping terraces behind her. Then it moved the correct 4 fingers. She gave me the tired copper-eyed look reserved for engineers who became poetic after surviving their own calculations. The repair crew replaced the distorted fitting in 17 minutes. They did not close the job when the bolt went in. Saya recorded the damage, Rin reloaded the arm, and Taro's apprentice checked the gauge twice. The proven works crystal flashed green only after the repaired gate held its full test weight. 1 green-gold pulse ran from the fitting through the quarry floor. It crossed every maintained node and entered the black mercy marker. The marker answered with a thin violet charcoal line pointed toward the capital. Our victory had just signed its own theft receipt. 1 child tied a red cord beside the sleeping row that had remained empty all night. Sora closed the ledger only after the last household marshal signed it. We had spent 12 days measuring failure because false comfort could kill people. Mogu pressed 1 broad paw against the stone and showed me the pulse again. His A-rank body trembled beneath bronze shoulder ridges that had carried the entire migration map. I lifted him before he could chase the signal into another wall. The investigator is off duty until breakfast. Mogu snorted and produced a crown resonance nail from somewhere under his chest fur. By midday, the ring of stones had become an evidence yard. Sora laid out the forged ration seals and the delivery weights proving 30% of our grain had vanished. Orin opened the duplicate payroll appendix he had protected since the quarry closed. 1 line reclassified a productive town as a refugee camp 6 days before the crown ended its land rights. Another line declared that all improvements accrued to the crown hearth. Saya pinned her waystone map beside it. The same rigid conduit pattern connected Hollowmere to 3 other settlements officially labeled failures. The 5 receipts did not depend on trusting me. They were stone, weight, contract, map, and repeatable charge. Orin adjusted his gold spectacles over the phrase that made his old hands shake. They did not abandon the quarry because it failed, he said. They renamed it so our repairs could feed them without restoring our rights. Anger moved around the ring, but Rin stopped it from becoming a speech. She planted 2 stakes on opposite sides of the crown boundary. Then, we test the line. Her crews built 2 permanent ramps from the same stone batch. Taro cut every wedge on the same gauge. Saya fixed both slopes to the same common datum. Rin loaded each ramp with equal barrels and washed their plumb cords for 1 full watch. Both carried the weight without measurable difference. Mogu touched the ramp inside the crown line first. White jade charge entered the stone and emerged as a weak green thread. The mercy marker drank the missing light before our eyes. The private panel opened above the ramp. Pop performance, identical. Node return. Inside crown line, 29%. Rin moved the same test crystal to the outside ramp. Its line burned nearly full. Triton outside. Crown line, 97%. Siphon confirmed. No one shared that result. Sora stared at the black marker as if calculating how many meals it had eaten. Vela arrived before sunset with 4 royal guards and her brass viewing lens. She had heard our copy pulse through the Waystone network. Her slate lavender cloak still carried the crown clasp, but she did not ask us to trust it. She weighed the barrels herself. She inspected Taro's stamps and scraped mortar from both ramps. She ordered the crews to swap the load without changing the test crystals. The inside ramp returned 29% again. The outside ramp returned 97%. Vela held her lens over the violet line until her olive eye reflected its geometry. Then she pressed her auditor's seal into the live record. I certify deliberate crown diversion under the royal surveyor's oath. 1 guard reached for her transmitter. Vela sent the record before his glove closed around it. The crown badge at her throat went dark. She looked down at the dead metal, then unclipped it herself. 1 guard quietly stepped away from her, as if suspension could spread through touch. Another turned his helmet so the viewing lens would not record his face. Vela placed the badge beside the 2 ramp crystals rather than hiding it. The oath had mattered only because she accepted its cost when the institution broke it. That small motion cost her an office, a salary, and every protected gate behind us. It bought Hollowmere a witness the palace could no longer quietly edit. The class appeared on the Waystone plate that evening. Cleon stood in cobalt and gold armor with Stormmane's white mane filling the transmission behind him. I showed them both ramp readings and Orin's reclassification clause. Clean folded his arms. The central subsidy is legal until a royal review says otherwise. A subsidy usually travels toward the poor settlement, I said. That is what makes it less confusing than theft. Aquino held the worn photo transit card near her wine magenta coat. Her violet eyes stayed on the palace doors beyond the image. The crown still controls the route home. Then ask what it charged the frontier to keep that route closed. She did not answer. The transmission ended before our exchange could become another old argument. Royal guards crossed the ring immediately afterward. Their captain declared, Vela suspended, and the conduit sample crown property. 2 soldiers lifted the marked stone into a sealed iron case. For 1 ugly second, the entire proof seemed to leave in their hands. Mogu sneezed against my sleeve. 3 stolen resonance nails rolled onto the table. Saya placed her copy pulse plate beside them and tapped the route she had preserved before the seizure. Siphon route, Mapid, 3-3. Capital Terminus, Charter Forum. The guards had taken one sample and revealed where we needed to carry the rest. Varen's gold invitation arrived before midnight. Hollowmere would receive a Day 12 freehold review in the Charter Forum. The summons promised 3 practical demonstrations. The gold border felt less like courtesy once we knew the review floor sat over the siphon terminus. Oren closed the summons and placed 31 household stones around the ring. Before we argue with a king, he said, we decide who is allowed to speak for us. He read the Hollowmere Covenant in plain language instead of legal rhythm. A 2/3 household quorum could adopt or amend the charter. No household representative could consent magically for another person. No official could remove food, water, shelter, medicine, protection, or voting rights from anyone who refused a link. The delegation could reject any recognition, patent, or bargain that preserved forced links elsewhere. Rin asked each clause to be repeated until the outer households could hear it through Saya signal plates. Sora read the cost of maintaining the network. Charlotte read the withdrawal procedure. Garo asked whether a family that voted against the charter would still receive protection during the next attack. 92 of 92. Rin answered. The first household stone moved inward. The second stayed where it was. By the end, 28 stones rested inside the charter circle. 3 remained outside as recorded abstentions. Household Charter, 2831. Delegation Redline, no forced links. Then Oren cleared the household stones away. The magical decision belonged to individual adults, not proxies. Every eligible adult received a small removable link token in private. Each person could place it, decline it, or pull it free without explanation. 71 adults made 71 separate decisions. Ring clerks screened the tokens behind canvas partitions. No forewoman, spouse, clan elder, or emergency coordinator could see an individual answer. Charlotte stationed a service clerk outside each partition with identical ration and clinic chits. People who emerged with dark tokens received the same chits as those glowing green gold. The procedure made the promise visible before anyone had to trust it. 68 tokens lit green gold. 3 remained dark. The 21 miners and dependents received service markers, not link tokens. ADU adult voluntary links, 6871. Miners auto-linked, ZER. Services guaranteed, 9292. The 3 honest refusals did not weaken the covenant. They completed its proof. The 12th foundation node opened beneath the ring as a broad green-gold circle. Foundation node, Hollowmere Covenant. Civic Learning, 390 Cs. For the first time, the mercy marker failed to swallow the whole glow. Rin remained the elected civic convener. The ring appointed me emergency technical coordinator for 30 days. My office could be recalled at any meeting, and every maintainer kept authority over their own node. I had expected legitimacy to feel like receiving power. Instead, it felt like seeing all the hands that could take that power back. At dawn, Hollowmere built the Atlas Keystone. The maintainers brought 1 tested workstone from each of the 11 physical systems. Each stone arrived with a maintenance signature and its last load result. Rin rejected 1 chipped sample from Tidebreak even though it would have fit the ring. The gate crew returned with the repaired fittings verified stone instead. Our artifact would not become legitimate by decorating it with 12 convenient rocks. The ring supplied a 12th witness stone for the covenant. Rin set all 12 around pale jade waystone marl. Taro fitted reclaimed crown conduit through the center. Saya aligned the telemetry groove toward the charter forum. Oren sealed a copy of the covenant beneath a clear stone plate. Nobody fed the keystone to Mogu or waited for it to hatch a miracle. Crews tightened the compression frame, recorded the pressure, and watched the assembly cure overnight. Vela attached her independent load audit where the guards could not remove it without breaking the public seal. Maintain nodes, 12th 1. Atlas Keystone, assembled by Hollowmere. Retain foundation charge, 492-5500. 8 units remained, and the 3 live review tests could supply them. The freehold summons named load-bearing repair, clean flow control, and timed evacuation. Passing all 3 would force legal consideration of our claim. Failing would place our keystone directly over the machine designed to consume it. Hollowmere did not empty itself for the trip. Sora, Charlotte, Garo, Taro, and most maintainers stayed with trained deputies at every node. They arranged live waystone testimony from the signal ridge. Rin, Saya, Oren, Vela, 6 workers, Mogu and I packed braces, test kits, signal plates, records, and the keystone. No one packed a trophy. On day 11 night, I carried my smooth guest stone to the edge of the ring. My carved line ran alone across its river-gray face. Rin checked the keystone cord behind me, because apparently romance still required a load inspection. "Will you add your alignment mark?" I asked. She studied me long enough to make the question feel heavier than any barrel test. Then she carved 1 copper-dusted line beside mine, not over it. Beside it. At dawn, the keystone's test cord still hung perfectly straight. The invitation border on Varen's summons changed from gold to compulsory royal red. The banishment gate looked smaller from the returning side. 12 days earlier, its gold bars had closed behind 1 student and a palm-sized mole. On day 12, they opened for a civic delegation carrying enough tools to make the guards nervous. I crossed first in the same teal field jacket I had worn into exile. Rin had repaired its torn shoulder with beastfolk brass scene guards. They were the only metal on me that resembled armor. Mogu crossed beside my boot in his badger-sized bastion form. His slate-brown back carried bronze ridges and faint teal-gold node glyphs. The guard who had called him gravebait stared at the claws that had mapped an entire migration basin. Mogu stared back and placed one insulting pebble on the gate threshold. Rin almost smiled. Saya and the 6-person work crew rolled the Atlas Keystone through the arch on a padded cart. Orin carried the charter case against his moss-gray shell. Vela carried her viewing lens but no crown badge. Our cargo was braces, gauges, filter cloth, dye bottles, signal plates, and copied records. We had brought no monster horns and no polished trophies. Behind us, the waystone plate displayed Hollowmere's live signal ridge. Sora stood at the ration board with every cache marked. Charlotte checked breath hall beside her assistants. Taro watched the tide break lanes while Taro signed the morning tool issue. The kingdom had not followed me to the capital by abandoning its foundations. It had sent a limited hand while the rest kept working. The escort captain reached for the keystone cart. Rin placed one claw on its brake. Witnessed review, load only. Her voice turned 5 armored wardens into men remembering a contract. They led us through ivory corridors toward the charter forum. The original guards recognized the mole they had expected to bury. None of them laughed this time. One guard glanced at the brass repairs on my coat and asked where my royal equipment had gone. I pointed at the tool cart. Most of it has handles. Mogu tapped the axle and found a loose retaining pin before the cart reached the first stair. Our youngest worker replaced it with a standardized clip from Taro's kit. The guard watched a routine maintenance check prevent a very expensive civic artifact from rolling downhill. It was not the heroic return he had imagined. It was a useful one. The forum held 4,300 registered attendees in stepped ivory tiers. Guild observers filled the lower rows with stamped notebooks. Summoned students occupied the royal side beneath banners embroidered with Varen's crest. Clients stood at their front in cobalt and gold armor. Stormmane's enormous sun-gold body rested behind him like a second dais. Cyan lightning moved through the lion's white mane. Akeno stood beside the official review leader in her wine magenta coat. Her rose-pink hair was pinned beneath a crown clasp. King Varen watched from the high platform in ivory and gold regalia. He looked exactly as controlled as a man who believed the floor belonged to him. 3 civic test lanes divided the central arena. One held a loaded brace with a split bearing. One carried 2 channels of dyed water through a cracked separation box. The last wound between audience sectors and 5 marked exits. Saya's wings lifted slightly when she saw the evacuation lane. They copied an old quarry routing test, she whispered. Then they gave it to the correct survey runner. The royal scanner descended before we touched any equipment. Gold light passed over my coat and Mogu's bronze shoulders. The public card opened large enough for all 4,320 witnesses to read. KAI. Combat value, 0, Mogu. Beast rank, F. Hollowmere. Settlement rank, F. A pocket of laughter rose from the student tier. It lasted less than a breath. I set the recovered Atlas Pass fragment into the review pedestal. The pale jade stone completed a radial groove under the forum floor. Waystone light reached Hollowmere, and 12 live node cards appeared above our crew. The laughter thinned into the sound of people counting. Varen lifted 2 fingers. Proceed with the freehold tests. Rin took the load-bearing lane without waiting for me. She red-tagged the split bearing and ordered the royal weight held in place. 2 workers seated a portable maker's spine brace into an old standard socket. Taro's gauge marks matched royal iron made decades before we arrived. Rin shifted the load in 3 controlled steps. The cracked bearing came free without the suspended stone dropping a finger's width. The crew fitted the replacement, reloaded it, and checked the plumb cord. Rin made the royal examiner initial the before and after gauge readings. He tried to sign before the second load cycle ended. She moved his pen away with one claw and watched the cord for the full interval. Only then did she let the ink touch the page. The guild observers in the lower tier copied that correction into their notebooks. The test was no longer a display performed for approval. It had become a method another crew could repeat after we left. LO aid bearing repair, passed. The lower guild rows stopped writing long enough to inspect the straight cord. Charlotte's voice came through the waystone for the clean flow lane. She directed our crew to mark a protected channel before pouring anything. We assembled a scaled clean boundary around the cracked separation box. A sealed spring weir slowed the dyed contamination and sent it toward a cleanout port. Clear water crossed the second channel without carrying a violet streak. Vela sampled both outlets with her own glass tubes. The first tube carried violet dye thick enough to stain the stopper. The second remained clear against Orin's parchment sash. Vela swapped the labels and repeated the sample so no one could claim a prepared bottle. The result remained unchanged. Clean flow control, passed. The third lane belonged to Saya. She raised one moon silver hand, and the audience saw the signal they had been shown before entering. Blue lantern meant the nearest lane remained open. Amber meant change route at the next plate. 3 bell strikes meant stop and leave room for mobility chairs, broad antlers, and folded wings. Household marshals in Hollowmere mirrored the pattern through the waystone. Saya turned 4,320 strangers into moving sectors without shouting a single order. She guided the trial group through 2 blocked routes and reached the muster marks inside the required time. She deliberately closed the nearest exit halfway through the trial. Blue lanterns shifted before the moving group reached the obstruction. No one had to reverse into the people behind them. An antlered attendee passed beneath the full-height clearance without ducking. A winged courier used the same lane with both wings folded naturally. Saya's timer stopped with every test participant on a counted muster mark. Time ed, evacuation, passed. Review, tests, passed, 3-3. Maintained nodes, 12-12. The review pedestal tried to add our earned foundation charge to Hollowmere's record. Violet charcoal geometry pulled 71% downward before the number settled. Growth diverted, 71%. The siphon displayed itself above the very preceding meant to deny it. Vela raised her lens to the royal platform. All 3 results are independently verified. Varen's jaw tightened by less than the width of a survey mark. That was still more movement than his face had shown during the herd report. The final 8 live load units entered the Atlas Keystone. White jade light passed through 12 witness stones and the Covenant copy beneath them. The retained charge number climbed 1 unit at a time. RETATA Foundation Charge, 500-500. Mogu planted all 3 blunt front claws on the review floor. The arena's old sockets answered him. His bronze shoulder ridges dissolved into warm gold lines. His body lengthened until his head reached my hip. Slate fur brightened into pale sandstone. A crown-like ridge formed over the same topaz eyes. A rotating white jade and gold map ring opened behind his left ear notch. Mogu, World Route MO. Private rank S. Authority, Voluntary Sanctuary. The evolution sent 1 warm pulse back through the waystone. In Hollowmere, all 12 node owners received the same strain map without surrendering their controls. Sora immediately used it to close 1 overloaded pantry shelf. Taro's deputies loosened a forge brace before heat expansion could bend it. S-rank authority reached home first as maintenance information. That was more Mogu's style than a roar would have been. The public scanner still insisted on F. Mogu looked up at it and snorted with professional disappointment. Then a hidden fracture opened beneath the royal beast lane. Storm main rose as cyan sparks jumped between the broken slabs. Clean tried the direct crossing, but the first golden paw drove the crack wider. Mogu tapped 3 pale load paths across the floor. Only 1 stayed green from end to end. Clean glanced at the crowd, then guided Stormane onto the former F-rank mole's line. The giant lion crossed without dislodging a single stone. The crowd watched S-rank spectacle depend on civic geometry. Mogu neither bowed nor claimed the lion. He merely closed the unsafe paths after it passed. Above us, the review crystal shifted from crown gold toward freehold green. Sovereign eligibility, under recognition. Varen stood before the count could finish. The delegation has falsified crown land records. His voice carried through every speaking plate. Confiscate the keystone, the charter, and the suspended surveyor's lens. Gold-armored wardens descended from 4 aisles. Vela projected her audit seal above their helmets. My record was transmitted before suspension. Then your lens is evidence of treason, Varen said. The exits slammed shut behind the wardens. Violet charcoal bars spread across the same lane Saya had just tested. The forum floor illuminated in the triangular geometry of Hollowmere's mercy marker. Mogu's rotating map ring filled with rigid lines aimed at our 12 nodes. Any attack near the keystone would feed the central conduit. Vela's lens exposed 3 hidden collection plates beneath the civic test lanes. The loaded brace, the clean flow box, and the evacuation pedestal had each been wired into the same extraction grid. Passing the review had charged the trap with our own verified work. Rin knelt beside the nearest plate and found fresh royal tool marks under an antique cover. Installed for today, she said. Orin held the compulsory red summons beside its matching authorization stamp. The crown had not reacted badly to losing. It had prepared confiscation before we arrived. Varen had not scheduled a review over the siphon by accident. He had scheduled a harvest with an audience. The room divided through visible choices. Some students lowered their weapons after seeing the 3 past tests. Others moved behind Clean because the crown still wore the official crest. Clean drew his storm lance and stepped toward the confiscation team. Stormane followed by Choice, its cyan mane brightening. Akeno held royal chorus around the declared crown review leader. Her face tightened when Vela demanded the live endorsement register. Saya did not wait for either of them to decide. She flashed the blue plates she had positioned during the evacuation test. The locks had closed 5 exits, but her crews had already opened the 2 service sectors behind them. Rows moved while the wardens were still forming ranks. 1,280 attendees cleared the forum before the final barriers sealed. Attendees evacuated. 12008. Saya's live board showed which sectors had crossed and which still contained people. No one was counted because a gate appeared open. Each number changed only when a marshal touched the far muster plate. The remaining crowd saw proof that the route worked before the first weapon reached us. That was the review's fourth pass, though the Crown had not requested it. Rin and our 6 workers pulled the portable braces around the evidence cart. Oren crouched behind them with the charter sealed against his chest. I drew a white chalk line around the keystone, Vela's lens, and the copied records. Mogu extended a pale gold safe path from the line to Saya's open sector. 3 choices, I called. Help preserve the evidence, stand aside, or leave through the marked route. I held up 1 removable sanctuary token. Adults enter only by their own word, and anyone may withdraw at once. The line did not move toward the crowd. It waited. The first volunteer stepped across and said yes. 2 more turned away and received the same open exit. Children followed civic evacuation routes without receiving magical tokens. For one moment, our little chalk circle held because people understood exactly what it asked. Then the first Crown Guardian vaulted over the wardens. Its spear drove through the clean flow apparatus we had passed minutes earlier. Violet charcoal light climbed the shaft and raced toward Hollowmere. The first confiscation warden crossed my chalk line behind a tower shield. Rin kicked a portable breakaway frame into an old review socket. The shield struck wood, iron, and a joint designed to yield. Impact traveled through 3 linked braces instead of the warden's shoulder. My new load share sense opened like a set of weights behind my eyes. I pushed the remaining force into an empty stone rail. The rail cracked, but the man stayed standing. 5 more wardens hit the line from both sides. Our frames folded in sequence and rolled them toward unoccupied lanes. Nobody inside the circle swung a blade. The wardens rose with bruised pride and lighter status cards. AT Tacker Mana, 7%. Crown Root Charge, plus 7%. Hollowmere Link, no loss. The violet conduit under their boots brightened by the exact amount they lost. Vela swept her viewing lens across the drain. She projected both numbers over the forum where every remaining attendee could see them. Your attack is paying the machine beneath you, she said. Arguments broke across the tiers. One Royal Guildmaster accused her of forging the projection. His own beast's status card lost another point while he spoke. The crowd did not become our ally at once. It became harder to lie to. That was enough for the next minute. One woman in a Royal Guild sash pulled her apprentice away from the warden's advance. A summoned swordsman kept his weapon raised but stepped out of the conduit line. 2 crown clerks began copying Vela's projection before their supervisors could close the record. Information did not make everyone brave. It gave fear a more accurate direction. The guardian that had speared our apparatus tore the metal shaft free. Contaminated violet water sprayed across the civic test lane. Charlotte's voice snapped through the waystone. Mark the splash boundary before anyone treats the guardian. One worker unrolled sage green cord around the spill. Another opened a clean refuge patch behind our braces. The guardian charged overhead on 4 jointed legs. Contracted speed fighters entered from the side corridors beneath it. They expected us to follow the largest threat. Saya struck 2 signal plates in an uneven rhythm. The third note revealed boots landing between the guardian's crashes. Side lane on the silent beat, she called. Ren rotated 2 frames toward the fighters without abandoning the evidence. Breakaway wedges sent them sliding across polished stone. The guardian landed where the frames had been and found only an empty pocket. Gara watched through Hollowmere's waystone plate. He marked its turning lag with an amber line. It commits its head before the rear joints, he said. The next time it lunged, our crew stepped through the blind side together. I did not shout 7 instructions over one another. Foundation Link carried 4 distinct pulses through Mogu's safe paths. Ren received load and frame direction. Saya received timing and exits. Charlotte received contamination and refuge boundaries. Gara received the guardian's empty turn lane. No one heard the other's commands as noise. The linked crew moved like specialists sharing a drawing, not puppets sharing a mind. At Hollowmere, the same pulses arrived as requests instead of commands. Charlotte corrected my first refuge boundary because violet spray could reach it from above. Saya shortened her signal interval when the speed fighters changed cadence. Ren rejected 1 frame rotation until a worker cleared the hinge arc. Each correction returned through the link and improved the next action. The network made disagreement faster. It did not make expertise disappear. The Guardian followed Garo's route marker into an unused demonstration bay. A breakaway screen closed behind it without crushing a single limb. The contracted fighters looked upward for new orders. Akino's royal chorus gave them one. Wine magenta rings spread from her raised hand around the declared Crown Review leader. 84 witnesses in the royal tier had genuinely endorsed that officer before the test. Their living phase signatures tightened every warden's timing. Then hundreds of identical echoes filled the Crown Route grid. Wardens who had stumbled a moment earlier began striking between our brace cycles. One cut a signal cord precisely when Saya reached for it. Another found the gap beneath Rin's turning frame. A crown construct lifted Oren's charter case with 1 iron claw. Mogu shot a pale load line under its planted foot. I spread the force while Rin drove a wedge into the loosened socket. The construct tipped away from Oren and dropped the case inside the chalk line. Its synchronization was too clean for the number of people visibly supporting it. Bella swung her lens from Akino's rings to the endorsement register. Saya placed the live audience roll beside the projected phases. The mismatch filled half the forum. Genuine endorsements, 84. Crown Root signature copies, 527. copies authorized by Akino, 0. Akino stared at the last line. I never gave it those names. It did not copy names, Vela said. It copied the phase of every real yes and repeated it without permission. The distinction mattered because the first 84 choices had been genuine. The theft did not make those people fake, it made their support dangerous in a way the crown had hidden from them. One of the 84 was the examiner who had watched Rin finish the full load cycle. He looked from his genuine seal to 7 violet copies wearing its exact phase. Another witness found 9 unauthorized echoes under her name. The crown had turned every visible yes into a printing plate. That knowledge changed their next decision before Akeno could defend the old one. Vela enlarged the register until the 84 witnesses could find their own seals. One older student removed her endorsement token. Her phase went dark, and 7 cloned rings failed with it. A guild observer withdrew next. 9 more copies collapsed. The rest of the 84 revoked in a wave of individual motions. 527 stolen echoes shattered into violet fragments. The wardens lost their impossible rhythm. Saya struck the recovered signal cord and opened 2 more evacuation lanes. Akino lowered her hand. The worn photo transit card slipped from her sleeve and hung against her palm. The crown crest above her offered an official road home. The departing audience below her offered no title at all. She turned toward them instead of toward me. Which objective do you endorse? She called. The answer came in separate voices from the move-in tiers. Evacuation. Safe exits. Saya's route cruise. The same 84 seals returned only after their owners chose the new objective. Royal Chorus changed shape. The wine magenta rings left the review leader and settled around Saya's blue signal lanes. Marshals began receiving cleaner timing without surrendering their decisions. Crowd sectors that had stalled at a narrow stair separated before reaching it. Wheelchairs and broad-bodied beasts moved through the center clearance first. The crown clasp in Akino's rose-pink hair broke with an audible snap. Her official champion title vanished from the public register. The route home permission beneath it vanished too. She closed her fingers around the old photograph. She did not look at me for absolution. East sector clear in 40 seconds, she told Saya. Saya answered with one silver-eyed nod and changed the next lantern. Clean stepped onto the review floor while the last copied ring died. Stormane descended behind him in a storm of cyan light. The enormous lion chose every step beside its partner. Their voluntary bond was real even when their objective was wrong. Cleon leveled his storm lance at the evidence enclosure. The king ordered confiscation, he said. You watched the tests pass, I answered. I watched you turn a review into rebellion. The exits locked before anyone rebelled. His jaw hardened. Stormane's mane rose as the pair gathered a resonant charge. The whole floor began carrying their vibration. Mogu marked 3 possible load paths in pale gold. The first route ended beneath a crowded western tier. The second crossed the fractured cleanflow lane and reached an occupied stair. Only the third entered the old grounding grid beside Saya's evacuation channel. Rin projected the predicted failures above the stone. Roud 1. Occupied tier collapse. Route 2. Evacuation stair failure. Route 3. Verified grounding grid. Cleon saw the same choice. 4,320 witnesses had been given. He could finish the spectacular strike or refuse its human cost. He and Stormane charged. For half the lane, the cyan arc pointed straight at our evidence. Then Cleon hauled his lance toward the third line. Stormane turned with him by choice. The pair crashed into Mogu's grounding path. Cyan lightning spread through Rin's verified plates and vanished below empty stone. The evidence enclosure remained standing. More importantly, the occupied tier remained standing. The impact blew gold dust across the entire lane. When it cleared, Stormane was still standing beside Cleon rather than kneeling to Mogu. The lion shook cyan sparks from its mane and checked the evacuation stair it had spared. Cleon followed its gaze before looking at his own scorched armor. Their choice belonged to them, which was the only reason it meant anything. Cleon braced one knee against the grid as residual current shook his armor. Stormane planted its golden paws and held the lane open for Akino's evacuees. This changes nothing between us, Cleon said through clenched teeth. Correct, I said. It changes whether those people live. His glare suggested he preferred my old habit of swallowing every useful sentence. He held the lane anyway. Our defense stopped being a duel because no one tried to own the whole field. Ren controlled the moving frames. Saya controlled routes and timing. Charlotte controlled refuge thresholds through the Waystone. Garo controlled guardian turn lanes from Hollowmere. Orin protected the charter record. Vela kept the siphon numbers public. Moog and I directed the network between them. The crown sent another guardian toward the evidence. Garo's marker pulled it across a false opening. Rin released a frame at the exact safe angle. The creature slid into an empty service lane and stopped against 3 distributed braces. The next speed fighter dropped his weapon after seeing his mana card dim. Saya gave him the same blue exit as everyone else. Mogu's rotating map ring widened across the review floor. Pale gold paths appeared between broken slabs, safe stairs, refuge points, and open sectors. Each adult saw a simple choice token at the nearest path. ACCEPT, Safe PHTE SIFP link. Decline and keep route access. Withdraw at any time. The first 17 adults opted in around the evidence circle. Adult safe, PHF links, 17. Their mana stopped leaking into the crown root grid. Unlinked people continued along the same marked exits. No lantern changed color when someone declined. No water station closed when someone withdrew. The number rose as the consequence became visible. Adult safe path, links, 46. Volunteers carried plain token boards along the refuge lanes. Each board showed the withdrawal mark larger than the acceptance mark. Vila's lens displayed every active link as a separate point instead of one glowing crowd. When a point vanished, the public count decreased immediately. No hidden phase copied the consent. No leader's seal multiplied it. An injured contracted beast stopped thrashing when the sanctuary redirected vibration away from its wound. Charlotte's remote triage team guided its handler toward the clean refuge zone. 5 adults removed their tokens after crossing the most damaged tier. All 5 links vanished at once. WHDR. Hours honored, 5:05. The empty safe paths remained open beneath their feet. 73 adults eventually chose the temporary network. Adult safe path links, 73. Crown root combat feed, 62%. Children moved under civic protection and adult marshals without being enrolled by proxy. A father who declined the link carried his daughter through the same illuminated lane as a linked warden. That image persuaded more people than any speech I could have given. Saya counted sectors while Aquino strengthened the chosen evacuation objective. The first 1,002 had escaped before the locks fully closed. 3,040 more now crossed the service gates. Saya split them across 4 muster courts beyond the forum. Akeno's chorus balanced timing between the courts without changing the destination each person chose. Royal cooks brought water to one court after watching Sora's cash ledger identify the shortage. Off-duty healers opened another beneath Charlotte's remote sanitation marks. The emergency network grew through adopted roles, not through one flag replacing another. The final mobility chair rolled over the grounding plate Klein still held. Our review attendees accounted for 4,032 4,032. The forum should have been over. Hollowmere had passed every test. The civilians were clear. The evidence remained public. Mogu's S-rank sanctuary had shown a lawful way to sever the drain. Varen placed both hands on the royal control stone. Vela's face changed before the floor did. That is not a confiscation command. Varen pressed the seal. Every frontier line on Saya's map ignited violet charcoal at once. The crown root stopped taking 71% and demanded everything. Rigid geometry erupted through the forum's cracked floor. The review pedestal split from base to crown. Our remote node cards began falling in Hollowmere. The repaired tidebreak fitting failed first. One sealed spring control line went dark. A maker's spine gauge wall tore free of its anchors. Crown root, full extraction. Hollowmere physical works failing, 3:11. Hollowmere Covenant, active. Time to network collapse, 18 minutes. The Waystone view showed exactly what those failures meant. Water climbed around one sealed spring overflow because its control gate had lost charge. Pantry workers moved bins away from a cracking south wall. The repaired tidebreak arm sagged over an empty lane where Garo had already cleared his deputies. No system failed as an abstract icon. Every falling number placed hands, food, water, or shelter in danger. Charlotte moved her clinic beds before I could call the warning. Taro's apprentices caught the falling gauges. Garo ordered deputies away from the failing tidebreak arm. The people who had stayed home were already keeping the kingdom alive. Varen's voice entered every Waystone channel. End this performance, and Hollowmere will be recognized sovereign today. A gold patent appeared above the broken review pedestal. The siphon will remain on the other 42 settlements. The charter case and Oren's arms seemed to become heavier. Varen looked directly at me. Save your people, builder, and let the frontier continue serving the capital. Behind his offer, 3 of our 11 physical works continued to fail. The forum answered Varen's offer by dropping half a stone balcony. Ren shoved me clear as the slab struck the review floor. One of our portable frames caught its edge and folded almost flat. Cracks raced through the old royal sockets beneath every tier. Violet charcoal conduit lines pulled downward like rigid lightning. Prob tests Ari de Superti set, 61%. Mogu's map ring showed 18 minutes before the network collapse reached every frontier node. Rin was already under the nearest span with a maker's spine brace. Saya threw common datum lines across the buckling floor. The marks made one level grid out of stonework built by 6 forgotten crews. Load on my count, Rin called. 4 willing workers seated the brace into a royal socket. At the same moment, Vela turned her lens toward the exposed crown root. Oren opened the charter beside her. I emptied Mogu's stolen resonance nails onto the projection plate. Sora's ration seals appeared through the Hollowmere Waystone. Saya added the conduit map. 5 separate receipts locked to the same violet geometry. Named frontier settlements filled the air above the failing forum. Each name opened a list of wells, walls, bridges, granaries, clinics, and refuges its people had built. Green gold growth arrows left those works and entered the capital. The dates of each transfer matched the dates those settlements had been declared. Failures. Summoned beast mana entered the same engine through a second channel. The capital's brilliant rank gains rose beside exact losses at the frontier. One bridge town had lost its legal rank. the morning its rebuilt span passed inspection. A farming refuge had been declared barren after its irrigation node produced a record harvest. A mountain clinic had watched its healing capacity fall each time it expanded a ward. People in the forum began finding their own promotions besides someone else's loss. Rin loaded the first brace while the evidence settled over it. The cracked span lifted 3 fingers. Pretty something expertise LO was 61%, 46%. Recipeats verified, 5-5. The repair did not end the collapse. It gave us enough time to read what the collapse had exposed. Proven Works crews red-tagged a second cracking socket. Behind its plate, Oren found the accreditation contingency. The Crown had expected Hollowmere to fail its review. If we somehow passed, the confiscation wards would pull our Atlas keystone into the Crown route. 12 verified nodes and a resident covenant would become the missing stabilizer for permanent extraction. Their review had offered us 2 approved endings. We could fail publicly and disappear as planned, or we could succeed and make the theft stronger. Varen watched crews shore the institution beneath his feet. The capital protects millions, he said through the trembling speaking plates. Frontier works can be rebuilt. The gold offer returned above the rubble. Hollowmere immediate. Sovereign recognition. KI, hereditary royal founder patent. Condition, crown route. Continuity across 42 settlements. He had placed a title beside 92 lives and expected the arithmetic to help him. Rin's crew seeded the second brace. The load cord swung hard enough to cut dust from the air. Oren read the covenant's no forced link clause over the noise. No recognition purchased through an unwilling settlement is lawful under Hollowmere's charter. Rin kept both claws on the jack. Our delegation mandate requires rejection. One by one, the maintainers confirmed through the waystone. Sora rejected it from the ration board. Charlotte rejected it beside the clinic beds. Garo rejected it beneath the repaired signal ridge. Taro rejected it while apprentices reset the gauge wall. 28 household stones glowed behind them. The 3 abstaining stones remained protected and still. One of the unlinked adults carried fresh spring water to the signal ridge during the vote. Another helped Taro's apprentices secure the forge without receiving a network pulse. Their work belonged to Hollowmere because they lived there, not because magic had enrolled them. The offer could not divide the people it was pretending to save. I looked at the royal founder patent with my name already engraved. The people never authorized me to accept that. The gold document cracked down its center. Our refusal landed before Rin's load cord stopped swinging. Varen's face finally lost its polished calm. The second socket failed anyway. One whole eastern tier tilted toward the crown root fracture. Mogu showed me why we could not simply destroy the engine. Its conduits had become load paths beneath the forum and lifelines to the frontier. Breaking the crown root would drop the arena and sever every remote settlement at once. We had to repair the structure, evacuate the danger, and reverse the network without forcing anyone into it. There was no time to invent new roles. We used the ones Hollowmere had already tested. Rin owned load and braces, Saya owned measurements, signals, and routes. Charlotte owned clean refuge and exposure limits. Garo owned turn lanes. Sora, Oren, and the contacted councils owned consent records. Moganai owned network direction. The assignment traveled through Foundation Link as 6 distinct pulses. Nobody had to ask who was in charge of another person's work. Compound Phase 1 began with measurement. Saya fixed a level datum across every surviving socket. Mogu mapped force through stone that the old drawings no longer matched. I used false sight only after Rin loaded each suspect joint. Pale weakness lines appeared under real strain instead of guesswork. Taro's gauges fit the old royal sockets because he had salvaged them from that same system. Maker spine kits reached crews through the cleared service lanes. One apprentice fitted a wedge made 3 days earlier in Hollowmere. It seated on the first strike in the capital. Another crew found a socket packed with decorative gold leaf that hid a missing anchor plate. Saya marked it red instead of forcing the standard brace into bad stone. Rin shifted its load toward 2 verified frames and ordered a custom plate cut. The maker's spine pattern shortened that fabrication without pretending every failure was identical. Common datum told us where the difference began. Proven works forced us to test whether the adaptation ended safely. Rin's teams did not trust any brace because it looked heroic. They inspected the socket, loaded the frame, measured deflection, repaired the joint, and tested it again. Proven works crystals changed from red to green, one at a time. The safe grid spread across the forum. SAFE grid map D, 100%. Arena support loss, 61%, 28%. Collapse forecast, 18 to 12 minutes. Small systems built in a condemned quarry had just stabilized crown-scale stone. Clean's recalculated status card opened in front of the grounded lane. The receipts stripped away every promotion funded by stolen frontier charge. His royal rank fell across 3 bright steps. Stormane's Cyan mane did not dim. Their genuine bond remained because it had never belonged to the crown. Cleon looked from the reduced card to the anchor failing beside him. He could have chased one final visible victory. Instead, he drove his lance into Rin's verified grounding plate. Stormane placed both forepaws inside Mogu's marked path. They discharged their remaining lightning through the repaired grid. Cyan Force held the anchor while workers locked its bolts. The crowd saw what remained when stolen status vanished. It was useful courage, not ownership of the whole answer. I did not call him redeemed. He did not ask me to. Compound Phase 2 began when crown root pressure burst an old drainage gallery. Violet runoff spread beneath the western tiers. Dry ground patterns opened 3 lower channels and sent the flow away from occupied routes. Charlotte marked a clean boundary around the corrupted stream. Sealed spring weirs slowed it for inspection and held clean water apart. Workers opened familiar cleanout ports instead of sealing the danger behind a wall. Sora released living pantry root caches from Hollowmere's inventory. Waystone carriers brought filter wool, clean water, repair cord, and measured rations to the forum lanes. The same stores that had survived the Red Moon now kept exhausted evacuees moving. Sora tracked every opened cache against the remaining Hollowmere reserve. When one capital official tried to seize a water cart for the royal platform, a pantry clerk showed its assigned refuge sector. The cart continued toward injured attendants instead. Transparent inventory turned a small argument into the correct delivery before authority could make it political. Charlotte overlaid breath hall zoning across the safest remaining tier. Wide clearances protected horns, wings, mobility chairs, and injured beasts. Akino kept royal chorus fixed on Saya's evacuation objective. Saya's many ways home signals redirected the last work crews around 2 new fractures. Blue plates opened paths. Amber plates turned sectors before they met. 3 bells cleared space for the slowest bodies. Civilian exposure, 47%, 9%. Review attendees accounted for. 4,032, 94,032. Serious. Evacuation injuries, 0. The human field was clear, but Crown Guardians still charged along the empty tiers. Compound Phase 3 began by turning force. Garo read their pursuit rhythm from Hollowmere and marked curved lanes. Rin's crews dropped tidebreak screens into the mapped sockets. Mogu shifted temporary ground pressure beneath the first Guardian. It followed the easiest vibration through a loose scree pattern and turned away from the network crew. The second Guardian struck a breakaway gate that folded without trapping it. Panicked, contracted beasts followed the same empty lane toward an open holding court. We did not defeat the force. We gave it somewhere harmless to go. Mogu reached the exposed frontier conduits only after the forum was stable enough to survive the contact. 43 reachable affected settlements appeared around his rotating map ring. 1 was Hollowmere. 42 were crown conduit settlements that had been feeding the capital without informed consent. Oren wrote one plain offer with no legal ornament. Permit counterflow for 30 minutes. Transfer no governance. Expire automatically. Keep services regardless of choice. Permanent membership would require a later local referendum. Saya sent the offer through every reachable waystone and conduit terminal. Outside acceptance had to come from an authorized adult council or quorum. 1 settlement answered yes through a council gathered in a flooded mill. A second answered from a mountain clinic. 3 declined before hearing the full engineering plan. We marked their no without argument. 1 council asked whether accepting would make me its ruler. Oren answered by pointing to the line transferring no governance. Another required its own expiration bell to end the 30-minute link. Saya added that condition to its path before counting the vote. A coastal settlement accepted only after its fishers verified the counterflow would not reverse their water gates. The network adapted to local ground and local authority just as every foundation node had. More councils verified their quorums and accepted the temporary counterflow. The count climbed while the 12-minute forecast fell. Settlements contacted, 43. Hollowmere pretensional external acceptances, 1 plus 36, 37. External declined or no response, 6. Governance rights transferred, none. Forged crown links rejected. The 6 outside refusals remained dark on Mogu's ring. He did not route around their decisions by calling the emergency exceptional. Inside Hollowmere, the 3 adults who had declined the magical link stayed unlinked. The 21 miners remained outside activation. No one had to reverse an honest choice because the sky was falling. Hollowmere adult links, 6871. Miners auto-linked naked, 0. Residents guaranteed full services, 9292. Freehold authority complete. White jade light entered the Atlas Keystone. The final system card appeared in green and gold. SSS eligible. We had lawful paths, but using them still required 1 exact correction. The crown root had spent decades pulling growth toward the capital. Mogu could not create replacement power without making the same lie in reverse. He could only return what each settlement had actually produced. I placed both hands on the Keystone's direction plate. Mogu pressed his 3 broad front claws beside mine. Flowline showed millions of stolen units moving through 43 histories. Fault site showed the one-directional weakness shared by every crown seal. Foundation link carried the reversal order only through 37 consenting counterflow paths. The Atlas Keystone verified source, amount, owner, and destination. Sora's ledgers supplied measured ration mosses. Vela's survey archive supplied diverted node totals. Oren's payroll copies fixed the dates and legal owners. Mogu compared those records to the live charge inside each conduit. Any unit without a verified destination remained in escrow instead of being awarded to Hollowmere. For the 6 settlements that declined or did not answer, Mogu cut the forced crown link. Their own stolen charge returned directly or entered a local escrow under their existing council. None of those 6 became a path for our power. None became a member of Hollowmere. None supplied authority to me. The violet arrows stopped. For one silent second, every conduit held its stolen weight. Then the arrows turned around. Siphon Reaver said, Stalin Foundation charge, returning. Declining settlements, used as paths, 0. Green gold light left the capital in rivers bearing 43 different names. Clinic walls recovered their lost strength. Collapsed bridge nodes woke under their own towns. Granary records restored years of vanished growth. Waystone windows opened around the forum as outside councils watched their own gauges rise. The flooded mill's pumps restarted under the hands of its local crew. The mountain clinic's dark ward lamps lit one by one. No distant town bowed toward the capital or toward me. They turned to the repairs their returned power made possible. The crown's rank display began falling as false credit departed. Hollowmere's public card finally released 12 days of compressed work. Hollowmere, Firelmere, FMI, E. The shelter, drainage, and spring appeared behind the letter. Hollowmere, EDCC. The pantry, maker's spine, and breath hall joined the network. Separal Smore, C2B, A. Proven works, many ways home, and tiebreak lit across the old quarry. Hollowmere. HOSS. 36 consenting external councils held their counterflows long enough to prove a realm could resist crown extraction. The Covenant burned brightest because its refusal still remained visible. Hollowmere, SSS. Status, Free Kingdom. Mogu rose from the review floor inside a white jade column. His collie-sized sandstone form grew to the size of a wolf. White gold fur flowed into terracotta markings along his shoulders. Crystal gold claws replaced the broad stone-colored paws. A keystone halo formed behind his familiar left ear notch. His cream crescent muzzle and topaz eyes remained unmistakably his. Imogu, Kingdom Heart. World Burrower, SSS. The public scanner flickered between F and SSS until a small crystal cracked inside it. Mogu placed one pebble beneath the broken card. Even Rin laughed at that. Vila turned her lens toward the live Hollowmere projection. Our existing quarry systems illuminated as one recognized network. The springworks shone white jade beneath the east galleries. Memorial lintels glowed above Breath Hall. Workshops, signal towers, refuge routes, and tunnel gates connected in green gold. The old basin remained rough, repaired, and inhabited. Beside it, a civic blueprint displayed the mature terraced city its returned capacity could build. The light did not conjure one finished roof. It raised skill, coordination, mana capacity, and legal rank. Every future wall still required stone, labor, testing, consent, and maintenance. That made the vision feel more powerful to me, not less. The capital crowd saw its own bright rank gains paired with named frontier losses. Vela read Varen's authorization seals aloud. Each order carried his ice blue royal cipher. Council guards lowered their weapons around the throne platform. Varen reached for the crown root control stone. It remained dark beneath his hand. Without stolen settlement growth, he had lost both the engine and his monopoly on rank. The cleansed conduit opened one record no one had claimed to reveal. A foreign coordinate trace ran beneath the original summoning seal. It matched the halfway stone pulse I had first seen in the quarry. The Atlas Pass fragment answered from our pedestal. Trout, CROUT, confirmed. Permanent anchor requirement, 7 waystones. Waystones secured, 1-7. Home had not been the price of justice. Justice had cleaned the record enough for home to become an engineering problem. The last cracked arena support settled onto Rin's verified brace. The forum held. Hollowmere's SSS card remained above us after every surge of light faded. Rin looked at the shattered Royal Founder patent near my boot. What is that title worth now? She asked. Sora's voice came through the waystone from 92 safe residents. Less than the paper. The verdict took one page because the receipts had already done the arguing. Hollowmere became an independent free kingdom under its own charter. All forced settlement links ended. Stolen ration and property claims returned to the communities named in Sora's ledgers. Any future network member required public maintenance records and a local vote. Vela transmitted the terms through the same lens that had cost her batch. Outside councils received their own copies before the capital could rename the verdict. The 6 settlements that had declined counterflow kept full title to their returned charge. None faced a tariff, delayed repair, or loyalty hearing for saying no. Rin's Stonereich Guild was exonerated by the Crown's quarry cost-cutting orders. Garo watched the child conscription quota burn out of the frontier law. Charlotte's resident-run clinic received permanent protection. Saya's reopened migration routes became protected civic ways, instead of royal toll corridors. Baron lost crown root authority before his council finished reading the seals. His own guards detained him beneath Vela's projected records. I did not stay for a longer courtroom scene. Hollowmere had roofs waiting for inspection. Before leaving the forum, I placed the expired copper warden seal beside our SSS charter. Its day 12 notch had once given the Crown permission to erase 92 people. Orin archived it as evidence and refused its renewal as authority. 3 months later, dawn reached the old quarry rim before it touched the city below. The same cracked western shelf still curved above the first completed district. Crews had built terraced stone homes against its stable lines. Green roofs followed the drainage contours Saya had marked during our first storm. Taro's workshop harangued beneath an indigo awning stretched 3 times wider than the original forge. Breath Hall opened into permanent refuge rooms with memorial lintels above every arch. Signal towers blinked from the north rim. White jade light traced new tunnel gates without hiding the ochre rock around them. Nothing had appeared from a card flip. Each dawn began with load tags hanging from unfinished spans. Each evening ended with maintainers signing what had passed and red marking what had not. Returned foundation growth let apprentices recognize errors sooner, but it never swung a hammer for them. 2 terrace walls came down by choice when Rin's crews measured uneven settlement. The second versions held because the first failures remained in the public ledger. Foxfolk masons set the terrace blocks by hand. Badgerfolk healers carried supplies into Charlotte's clinic. Antelope guards checked Garo's turn lanes. Wolfkin bookkeepers argued with Sora over a half-weight crate. Every structure still carried the names of its maker and maintainer. Reopened trade wagons crossed the Atlas Bridge on Taro's standardized fittings. Expanded mooncat beds and cricket bins filled the south terrace. The living pantry board reached 41 days without inventing a single meal. 26 of the 42 outside settlements independently ratified permanent membership. The remaining 16 stayed sovereign, unpenalized, and connected only by agreements they chose. After the construction images had already proved the work, one compact card appeared above the ring. Safe shelter, Salter, complete. Food reserve, 41 days. Red Moon Defense C complete. My emergency 30-day appointment expired exactly when the charter said it would. 1 year after the ring formed, Hollowmere held its scheduled office election. I stood as one candidate among several builders, clerks, and maintainers. Oren read every candidate's authority and recall conditions before a single stone moved. The 3 adults outside the magical link voted under the same civic rules as everyone else. The household stones elected me first builder under the same recall clause. Rin remained civic convener, which meant she could still reject my schedules in an official capacity. A terrifying concentration of power, I told her. Then draw better schedules, she said. I returned our dual-mark guest stone to the rebuilt ring. My carved line and her alignment mark still ran beside each other. I asked before setting it next to hers. She answered by clearing a place with one claw. Above the city gate, Mogu sat in his wolf-sized kingdom heart form. His crystal gold claws rested on a green-gold tunnel map. The old public appraisal card flickered beneath him one final time. Combat value, 0. Behind that ridiculous verdict stood an SSS city of roofs, ledgers, clinics, gates, and chosen links. Mogu dropped a pebble onto the card. Before it landed, the waystone at the gate answered with a second pulse. The single secured groove flared white jade. The signal came from beneath a frontier settlement erased from every royal map 30 years earlier. Saya overlaid the pulse on her recovered route charts. The point lay beyond an abandoned pass where crown records showed empty slate. Mogu's halo turned once, and a thin tunnel line stopped at the edge of our current map. Earth remained 6 anchors away. Our next foundation had just called us by name. The court called Mogu a gravedigger. Hollowmere gave him 12 working foundations, and together we built a kingdom the crown could not own.